Good afternoon. It is the 22nd of March, 2026. Seth Andrews with the man, the legend, Matt Dillahunty. Hey, Matt, how you doing, brother?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. I mean, the world's on fire and everybody sucks. But beyond that, I'm good. I've been reading all the narration lately, or all the narratives about how Hegseth, etc., are fighting a holy war. He's using all this religified language. And I think, is every war a holy war, Matt? Like, I was going through my mental Rolodex, and it's always God is on our side and God wants us to do this. And I think, has this always been the case? All right. It's not my idea. We are ordained by the Almighty, kind of thing,
Yep. I'd say they're all unholy wars. I'd say that all wars are pretty much unholy. Not that there's anything wrong with defending yourself. I'm not, being a pacifist. And on that, like, how you doing? For years, when people would ask me how I'm doing, I just would always answer honestly, like, meh, okay, bad, whatever. And then I realized it's probably not best to be honest about that question as often as I was. So now I set a new bar of, hey, the world is on fire, everything sucks, everything's going bad. But with respect to that, am I doing better than average or better than I was or not? And so I just go with that now, because
I always just saw it as like a warm up. Like, you don't walk into a conversation and begin talking about the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. So, hey, how's it going?
Yep.
Is sort of the on ramp into other dialogue, and it's always, oh, I'm good, whatever,
Yep. No, I
hot
get
day
it.
out today, going to be 92. Yeah. Nobody really cares. They're just,
It's a number. There were a number of things where, when I realized that, when I found my way out of religion. By the way, this is a call-in show. You can call 720-619-2288. And if you're someone who believes in a God or has some sort of religious beliefs and thinks that we and other people should share it, that it is in fact a rational position that we're missing out on, you can call in and defend that. We're both former believers. And when I found my way out of Christianity, even before I, was identifying as an atheist or anything like that, it became clear that without realizing it, I'd been dishonest with myself. That there are these, it's not that you're actively saying, ooh, I'm going to tell myself a lie. It's that you trust things and you depend on things and you want things to not change. And so I think you did a lecture and or potentially wrote a couple of books, not just with viewing things with your God glasses, but this notion that I'm engaged in a bit of self-deception, in part because it feels good, because it keeps me in with my in-group, because it keeps me comforted about, a potential afterlife and hearing all that. And when I figured out that I didn't have good reason to believe that, I decided, I'm going to do everything in my power to not just be honest with other people, but to be honest with myself. And so, how am I actually feeling about this? How am I doing? And that prompted me to do stuff like, I didn't monetize my YouTube for ages, in part because I didn't want somebody to be, like, Matt's doing this for the clicks and the money, because I wasn't. It was a mission. Hell, I went broke doing it. But I wanted to interact with people honestly. And it turns out you can be a genuinely honest person, and not everybody appreciates brutal honesty and matter of fact as much as I do, which I knew, but I didn't care about. And now I care more about that.
Yeah, I remember I was part of a university, and I can't remember the university that contacted me and said, we're seeking the opinion and the perspective of atheists. It was one of those things, I don't know. I'm like, all right, whatever. And this is probably 8 years ago. And one of the questions was, well, I mean, you do this for a living, right? I mean, you make money, meaning I pay my bills as a full time activist. And that was supposed to be a disqualifier, or it's supposed to discredit the work. And I was like, well, does that mean I'm disingenuous? Or does it mean that I found a way to do what I do full time? I mean, do you begrudge a full time musician? Do you think they genuinely don't love songwriting and singing and performing? What about someone who wrote a book and they're able to use royalties to pay the bills? They're a full time author speaker. What about someone who is, an artist or an activist or something in another vein who finds a way to be able to do what they're passionate about full time? Would you say that they're counterfeits? And they seemed satisfied with the answer, but they also seemed like it had not occurred to them. Like a pastor, if somebody who makes a living doing what they do is automatically a fake or discredited, you have just wiped off the map every even part-time pastor on the planet. So I think it's kind of a non-argument that people walk into the conversation with. I also, coming back to this idea of belief, I think the Bible commands belief, right? And do not doubt. And I think, how do you command someone to believe? Matt says, Seth, I want you to believe that gravity doesn't exist. It's impossible for me not to think, oh, well, gravity exists. My belief is already there organically. And I always felt like it was a major flaw. Well, once I came out of the faith, it's a major flaw. How do you command someone to believe? You can command them to profess a belief, but you can't tell me to accept an alternate reality in my bones simply because you say it is that way. I always found that was problematic. You probably addressed that a lot in your counter-apologetics work, but that was just on my mind. So,
yep. So I guess we're doing okay, all things considered. And we are starting to get some calls coming in. We don't have a theist yet. And maybe it's because, church just got out and they're maybe at the after church dinner.
I'm hoping we get something new, something interesting. I'd like to see someone who's not a serial caller, who apparently blocks out every Sunday from 1 to 4. And they're so well known that even if they disguise their voice or use an alias, everybody in the chat knows who they are and what their argument is. I'm hoping we can find some fresh meat today. And I think, honestly, I'm curious, and so is Matt. If you believe in a God, I think you need to be able to defend that claim. It is a truth claim, and you should be happy to be able to do so. If you come in respectfully and you present your position, we're not going to roast you. We're not going to do this or that. If you go off the rails or whatnot, I can't make any guarantees, but I'm all about a good faith discussion. And those are the two words I like to use even in my own platform. If somebody dials in, even with what I consider to be a bad idea, if I consider that they are moving in with good faith to have a discussion about it, what the hell? Let's have a discussion about it. And that's the criteria here. FYI, I want everybody to be aware that the No Kings protest is happening across the country and around the world on Saturday, the 28th of this month. Now, if you've not been aware for some reason that No Kings is happening, there have been 2 other protests. The last one was in mid-October of 2025. There were, I think, 1,700 separate protests with millions, I think are upwards of 7 or more million people protesting in the streets, that, we are essentially watching the moment-by-moment dismantling of American democracy and the installation of an oligarchy, monarchy, totalitarian fascist government. So apparently there are already 3,000 plus events that are going to happen across the country this Saturday. And I would encourage everybody, check nokings.org and see if there's something happening in your zip code, if there's some place you can drive or travel, make some noise about it. I got my posters printed. I went into Photoshop and just mocked up some stuff. And so I am ready. It's a double-sided thing. That's one side. It says, if only victims were as protected as the Epstein files. I thought that would be a relevant one. And then for the other one, I wanted to tweak ICE. It said, uneducated, criminal record, tiny penis, join ICE. And it shows ICE staring down a helpless young boy, which is essentially the reality that we live in. So, I mean, we can curse the darkness, but I genuinely think a lot of people say protest doesn't make a difference. Fine. Let's say the politicians in power aren't going to budge. Let's say. I'm not totally convinced that's the case. I do think at some point the water will boil over. But more than anything else, I don't want history to look back and say that we weren't shouting in the streets and we weren't pounding the drum and defending and speaking up on behalf of the marginalized and the oppressed and the suffering and the people who are literally under the boot. I want history to look back and say there were tens of millions of people who resisted. So if nothing else was to happen, and I hope more does, but I think that's a bare minimum for me. So the cynics who say, well, protest doesn't change anything are totally unfamiliar with the history of protest, right? Woman's right to vote came through protest, civil rights movement, protests. So many advances in our civilization and evolution toward better ideas have come through protests. So get your ass out there on Saturday, the 28th, nokings.org. Just a plug. I wanted to throw that out there, Matt. Natalie and I will be there for sure.
Yeah, I have another commitment on the 28th. I have to actually work. But we've been monitoring. There's some of the stuff where it's safer than others. And because we live in Austin, this kind of liberal hippie town, it's generally pretty safe here. And we're, I don't know, I'm cautiously optimistic. I say that every couple of years. I'm cautiously optimistic that things are on the verge of improving, but that might just be a rationalization on my part, so that I don't have to recognize that we might have just started World War III.
Yeah.
And it feels like that a little more every single day and I had to step away from I've stepped away quite a bit from social media because I'm tired of the stupid. But I also had to kind of back off the news just a little bit because I was, those old commercials of, oh, you're soaking in it. Yeah, I was soaking in that. And it's like, oh, we've started potentially an illegal war on behalf of Israel. And while that's going on, what's happening? Oh, China's surrounded Taiwan and North Korea's launching missiles in a demonstration. And Israel's also going after Lebanon. And Trump's talking about potentially taking Cuba and still has eyes on Greenland. And I'm just like, it's overwhelming. And you had mentioned earlier this notion of Hegseth and others engaged in this sort of Christian nationalist end times promotion.
Yeah,
and I did an episode about that because Hemmett wrote an article about Mikey Weinstein's dubious claims, and set aside what is true or isn't true about what Mikey actually said or how many reports he's getting from military leaders. I think Rebecca Watson did a great job kind of addressing Hemmett's objections and the actual issue, which is, yeah, I think Mikey Weinstein is largely exaggerating and potentially problematic, but there's no denying there are people who believe that this is necessary. Like I was one of them. It's not surprising to me at all as a former Southern Baptist that there are people who are actively working towards what they see as potentially Armageddon with glee, because this brings about the kingdom of heaven. And how can that possibly be a bad thing?
Well, when we see our ambassador to Israel, right, Mike Huckabee, a Bible literalist Zionist Christian who believes that Israel must be defended and supported at all costs. And he uses the Bible as his rationale. And I'm like, why are we trusting people who want to bring about the end of the world with foreign policy? And I think it also is reductive. My parents were hardcore Israel supporters, like blind, blank support. And I thought to myself, there are a lot of people who are in Israel who hate Netanyahu and who are grieved by the Gaza genocide and who think this is all just nonsense. And they despise, the leadership in place. It's so reductive to say Israel. I think we have to begin to unlayer that onion. But whether it's Trump or Hegseth or Huckabee or anybody else, to frame what's happening in a biblical narrative, by the Talking Animals book, by the Blood Magic book, by the seven-headed dragon writing space harlot book is to me terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. So I do see somebody on the switchboard. It is not a theist. We would welcome a call from a God believer or someone who is spiritual. Do you believe in ghosts, the otherworldly, the supernatural, karma? I don't know. Call us and we'll talk. I'm going to say it is, do I say it like the sandwich, like gyro, or out of South Carolina? How do I pronounce your name?
You can call me Gyro.
Gyro. Forgive me. Welcome to the show. You're on with Matt and Seth. What's on your mind?
Not at all, Seth. It's great to be on with the both of you. I hope you're doing well. Really
Thank
love
you.
the show. You're two of my favorite hosts.
Thank you.
I'm an atheist, and my question relates to Gnostic atheism versus agnostic atheism, and what we can and cannot say that we know. So,
Would you do me a
if
favor?
someone,
Would
yeah,
you? I want to make sure I'm understanding your definitions of Gnostic and agnostic atheism.
okay. So the agnostic atheist position, if I understand correctly, would be that we don't accept the God claims as true or likely to be true. So we reject them on that basis, but that we can't say that we know that a God doesn't exist. Whereas if I'm correct, a Gnostic atheist position relates to that you would know that God doesn't exist in the same way that you know Santa Claus doesn't exist, or that the cosmic tea kettle or the spaghetti monster doesn't exist.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. I bumped the mic. Go ahead. What was your question or point?
So if someone posits a belief in an unfalsifiable God, are we irrational to say that we know that that God doesn't exist? In the same way that we know that the cosmic tea kettle doesn't exist.
I'll let Matt begin. What do you think, brother?
I don't know how you falsify an unfalsifiable claim. If the claim is absurd or logically contradictory, you can, dismiss that. But you don't know there's not a teapot out there orbiting. That's the point. You can have a reasonable belief, and you can colloquially make an argument that if we define the teapot correctly, as in something that was, created 6 months ago, you can know that unless there's been some violation in reality and laws of physics, you can know that that's not out there. But knowledge being a subset of belief, you can have a reasonable belief of something, and then at some point it rises to knowledge. Now, the standard of justified true beliefs is, I don't find it particularly useful. I think most people are just talking about how confident they are. And as long as that confidence is justified, then, I mean, I don't know how you can falsify an unfalsifiable belief, but if you have an absurd God claim, you can certainly say that that God doesn't exist, in the same way that that there's not a square circle.
Right. Okay. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a logically contradictory God. In my example, so like say Santa Claus, for example, you wouldn't feel that you're justified in saying that Santa Claus doesn't exist.
I would be happy to say that I know that Santa Claus isn't real in the sense that we're generally talking about him. Whether or not there is a real person behind a myth or tied to the myth, or whether or not, there's some other definition of Santa Claus, I don't know. I can only address the ones that I'm able to assess. But the justifications for that aren't that, oh, he's magical or anything else. It's that we have strong evidence that the story is fictional and no supporting evidence of the elements of the story, so that if it were actually true, we would expect evidence. This is something like Victor Singer used to talk about. I miss him. He wrote a great book, but one of the points that he made is this constant claim that we hear that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Of course it is. It isn't confirmation of absence, but it is evidence against the claim. And he made the point of saying that it's absolutely the case if the claim is such that we would expect there to be evidence. If you tell me you just, slaughtered a chicken in your bathroom and you come out with blood all over your clothes and you're like, I just slaughtered a chicken in the bathroom. We go in the bathroom and there's no blood or feathers or anything else in the bathroom. That's evidence against your claim despite having some evidence for it. So it's about what evidence would be expected if the claim were true.
I'm also thinking that it's kind of an apples and oranges thing. The nebulous, is there a God out there somewhere claim against Santa Claus? I mean, we can trace the origins of Santa Claus. We can trace it back to St. Nicholas. We can trace it back to the illustrations of Thomas Nast. We can trace it back to A Night Before Christmas and when it was written, and the monetization by the retailers to sell products, the department stores popularizing Santa. I mean, we have a paper trail. It's almost like when you go back to the history of Mormonism. People are like, well, do you know the Mormon God doesn't exist? I'm like, well, that's an easy one because we can actually go back and see where the origin is, and we can dismantle it from its source. If you're talking about any God anywhere, that's also a complex question because you got to define God. If you ask me, is a personal benevolent God, does that exist? I can say hell no. Absolutely, because a personal benevolent God would have appeared and revealed and eliminated suffering and acted it in a reasonable way. So I can say that God definitely does not exist, right? I know there is no benevolent personal God. I mean, I'm pretty confident in saying that. But is there an uninvolved, nebulous, other deistic first cause watchmaker goo in the universal membrane somewhere? I mean, you can assert it. I don't buy it, but I guess I could say I don't know it. I don't know, Matt, is that lazy? if I say, well, universal goo, I don't know. Yeah. Sounds vaguely naughty.
There's a difference between, how we're going to talk about knowledge in a colloquial sense versus in like a strict sense. Like, for example, I'm an atheist. I'm also an anti-theist. And I also actively believe there are no gods in the general sense. Would I claim to know there's no gods? No. But I think I have a reasonably justified belief that for the overwhelming majority of things that people would describe as a god, not only do we not have good reason to believe in them, we have good reason to not believe in them. That all of them contradict some observable fact about reality or fail to meet or provide the expected evidence we would count on if they were true. And for many of them, the strong evidence against them rises to the point where I can say with great confidence that I know that, for example, the Christian God that I believed in as a Southern Baptist, I know that God does not exist. Because that God, supposedly, if I was sincere, when I reached out to that God, promised to reveal itself to me. I have done so, and therefore either that God does not exist. Some other version of that God might exist that doesn't want to reveal itself to me, but that one that wants to reveal itself to me definitely does not exist. I am as confident of that as I am my own name. Although I can change my name too. But Gyro, I'm wondering, what is it you're hoping to get at? Because if we're, like, for example, there are people that tell you theism is making a positive claim, and so that's a belief claim, and therefore you could be a Gnostic theist, where you claim to know that belief claim, or an agnostic theist, which is like, I believe there's a God, but I don't know there's a God. Since atheism is merely, at its minimum, the rejection of that, it's not making a positive claim. And so if you're in the I don't believe there's a God, that can't be a Gnostic position. The only Gnostic position could be against the strong atheist position of I believe there are no gods, or I believe this God doesn't exist for a specific God. Those could be knowledge claims. I don't know what we're trying to get at.
Thank you. That's very well thought out answers and good point. I guess I just kind of wanted to maybe achieve some clarity on my own positions and sort of organize my thoughts a little with regards to knowledge claims and theistic claims.
Cool. Well, I mean, I don't get too hung up on the labels. I remember, well, I'll talk about it in a minute. Do you have anything else for us, Gyro, before we move on?
Just one very quick question. Does Jim Burrows still do shows?
I do not know.
Yeah, I haven't had Jim on in a while, but I know he's still doing shows. He's doing shows with other people as well. We just haven't had him on here recently.
I'd love to have a show with Jim and Seth together. I think that'd be a great team.
Mm-hmm. Have somebody's people call my people. Gyro, thanks for calling the show. Take care.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a great rest of the show.
I know that we in the movement are not immune from being pedantic about labels. And I have seen online arguments, you know, are you a Gnostic atheist or an agnostic? Are you a soft or a hard atheist? Where do you fall on the Dawkins? I always found the Dawkins scale to be just laughable. Are you a 1 or a 7? And people tend to want to draw these really hard lines and categorize everything with pretty reductive boxes. I'm like, well, somebody, who was it who was arguing about whether or not a rock was an atheist? And that argument's been going on for years. And I just think, who gives a shit? Like, your journey belongs to you. You can frame it or phrase it or label it however you want. I myself use the word atheist, and I use it in, I think, the simple and reasonable definition of the term. I do not believe in a God.
Yep.
I just read an article that was published by a gentleman in the Atlantic, and he was talking about a book that was released by one of the former editors of Harper's Magazine. And this guy wrote a book about why he is no longer an atheist, and he goes through the typical stuff. Well, I'm a skeptic, and I used to go through one, and then I did this, and I read all of the great skeptics, but I knew there was a vacuum in my heart. And he made the argument that it was falling in love with a woman who became his wife. And that feeling, that transcendence of heart, that emotion that could not be described by mere naturalism, this was proof of God. And of course, it happened to be the God of the religion that he had left from childhood, which was the Catholic faith. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. So obviously the God would be part of the Catholic Corporation and the world's biggest pedophile cover-up ring. But I just think, that's weak sauce. To me, that's a weak reasoning for the existence of God. And now he calls himself a skeptical believer. Whatever. I don't get too hung up on the labels. I'm much more interested in the path that you got there and kind of where you are. And we can discuss the semantics later. Do you worry about that kind of stuff? I mean, what do you call yourself?
I don't care largely about the labels. I am moderately protective of some of the labels. For example, there's a lot of people that would call themselves a skeptic who probably couldn't give kind of a baseline definition or understanding of what's generally meant in, the modern scientific skeptic movement. And I love, AC Grayling and I sat down in the UK and I did an interview with him on my channel. It was after he gave a lecture, which, if you've never seen Grayling give a lecture, you absolutely have to, because not only does he have great hair and is incredibly well spoken, but he also has an eidetic memory. And so, unlike Seth and myself, who still do things differently, we have notes. I probably have fewer notes than Seth does because I tend to operate off an outline and then wing it more than Seth does. But Grayling, I think, has the entire talk word for word memorized before he ever walks out there, with the exception of whatever he's going to add to it. And it's brilliant. But he gave a talk about the history of skepticism and the skeptic label. And this, how once upon a time it was far closer to cynicism and it wasn't about sound epistemology, and how modern kind of scientific skepticism relies on that. And at the end of it, it's, Hume's I want to believe as many true things and as few, or I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, which is based on Hume's, the wise man proportions his confidence to his confidence to the evidence. So you shouldn't be more confident in your position than the evidence supports. And how do you go about that? Well, you engage in sort of critical thinking and analysis, and you find the best tools to try to distinguish, at a minimum, to eliminate falling for false beliefs, and then also to hopefully find true beliefs. And so when I hear someone say, oh, I'm a skeptic, by the way, if you're out there and you're a believer, a God believer, and you consider yourself a skeptic, call in and explain to me how the God claim met the burden of proof that any reasonable skeptic would put up. I don't understand. I used to go, I went to the Amazing Meeting. I was at TAM 7. And that was back when, like, I think Hal Bidlack and was kind of the MC. And of course, he was a theist, and he'd remind people, not everybody here is an atheist, so let's keep the atheist talk to a minimum. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I came to the biggest skeptic convention on the planet, and we're here lecturing about skepticism and about applied skepticism, and you're trying to tell me, don't talk about the biggest subject we could possibly talk about. Let's just stick with Bigfoot and psychics and dowsing, and not the fact that there's billions of people on this planet currently and in the past who believe in something that any reasonable skeptic should acknowledge they don't have good reason for. Because frankly, if there were skeptics that had good reasons for God beliefs, none of us would be atheists right now. It would be pretty trivial to demonstrate, especially to other skeptics.
I went on a ghost hunt, a paranormal investigation last year. There was a Tulsa area paranormal group, and this is what they do. And then there was another guy named Brandon Broussard. He's an atheist, but he likes to go and document, and he's curious. He's like, well, if a ghost shows up, okay, fine. I want to know that, but I don't buy it, but I enjoy it. No, I buy that. I like a good ghost story. So he asked if I wanted to tag along. So I took a 3-camera rig to the Brown Mansion in Coffeyville, Kansas. But one thing that was interesting, I feel like people use the words, I'm a skeptic, I'm very skeptical, as kind of a way of future proofing or critique proofing a methodology or a claim. So the paranormal group is like, hey, I never once believed any of this stuff. I was a skeptic, and I still am a skeptic. And then the door closed by itself. Then we saw the object thrown down, you know? And when I meet a lot of people who believe in not just gods, but psychic powers and the spiritual karma, that kind of thing, they like to start with, I'm a skeptic. You know, I was a skeptical person, and I still am, and even I have arrived at this very reasonable conclusion. And it seems like a sort of a way to give me their resume or supposed resume.
It very much is.
Yeah.
When the first, so it's like when the first words they say is, I was a skeptic. Okay, first of all, if you say you were a skeptic, you fundamentally failed skepticism. But then you're like, I am a skeptic, and then this happened. That's exactly like, for example, there was a guy that called into the show the other night who wanted to tell us about his supposed supernatural experiences. And he started with all of the closing all the doors. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't take anything that can alter the brain chemistry. Basically shutting all the potential things we'd ask, which is one way to save us time, because I don't have to ask, hey, is it possible you were drunk if you're never drunk? But when you do that, it lets us all know exactly what you're thinking. Fundamentally, your claim is not likely to be accepted, and here's the different ways that people would dismiss it. But you have failed to understand that merely eliminating those options does not in any way mean that your conclusion that it's supernatural in origin becomes a possible option or the most likely option. That's what they think they're doing. It reminds me of the evolution deniers trying to point out problems. Oh, here's this problem in our radiometric dating thing. Here's this anomaly or this thing. And then they act like, aha, that undermines all of evolution. And if we can just undermine evolution, creationism wins by default. No, it doesn't. We could find out that everything we understood about genetics and random mutations and natural selection is fundamentally flawed, and that still wouldn't prove that a magic man created everything and made it look like it wasn't created.
And there are some idiots on this planet, but there's this mistake that a lot of people make, that really smart people can't fall for really dumb ideas. They don't understand the modular nature of the brain, and belief and bias and all these other, whether you're preconditioned or programmed, or there are 1,000 reasons. But I mean, when someone says I'm a skeptic, I prepare myself, because I've heard people say, well, I'm a skeptic, and I know we didn't land on the moon, and Stanley Kubrick faked all the footage of the moon landing. Look at the shadows and look at all this. The earth is flat. I met a flat earther at an atheist conference in Chicago. I'll never forget the guy. And by looking at him and speaking to him, I think he was like an engineer. Germ deniers say they're skeptical. 9/11 truthers, they're skeptical. Anti-vaxxers, QAnoners, deep state people, they're all supposed skeptics. And I'm just like, I mean, the bar's pretty low. You can throw the word out, but it doesn't make you skeptical. That's
Yep.
what I'm saying.
Well, it's been, I don't know how many minutes since we put out that call, and we don't have any skeptics who are claiming that there's a justification for theism. Actually, we don't have any theists calling in to say that theism justified, but we do have a caller, so.
No, why not? Let's talk to, Fishy from Malaysia. Did I get the name right? Fishy?
Yes.
Welcome to the show. You're on with Matt and Seth. What's on your mind?
Hi. So it's been like 2 weeks ago where I argued with some people in the trans community about how religion is bad. And they study history of religions and how it functions in society. And they tell me that I should just let people be, that some people do benefit from religion. And I'm calling to ask whether I should try to convince those kind of people otherwise, and all those practicing the argument, I guess, in the future.
Oh, we have thoughts. We have thoughts on this. Matt, religion makes a lot of people happy, and it's provided art and wonderful expressions of humanity. Certainly, religion can be good for the world. How would you respond to that one?
I think people are good for the world, and people have done good. And while some religions may have inspired some people to be better than they were, they've also inspired people to be worse than they were. And I don't think that religions were in any way necessary to inspire things. I think, religious organizations have built universities, and they've built hospitals. And so they have educated people, although sometimes in a way that's a little dubious and biased, and omits certain things or changes things. Certainly the stories have inspired great art, but I think there's a lot of fan art for things that, well, I was going to say like, Star Wars, but some people have turned that into a religion as well. I'm not convinced they can't turn anything into a religion. But when I hear religions do good things, my answer is always no, people do good things. And sometimes they give credit to their religion, but I'm convinced those same people would be doing those good things largely just knowing that it was needed, and that the good being done is better if it's done without appeals to the religion. I've worked with organizations like Atheists Helping the Homeless and Humanists at Work, who go out and help homeless. Like, we have a massive homeless population here, or houseless population here in Austin, in part because of the weather. It makes it easier for people to live outside. And so we would go down, or these organizations would go down. I wasn't frequently there. I've only been down there a handful of times. And they would hand out food, and they would hand out socks and toothbrushes and all the things that people who didn't have a house might need. And the question they were frequently asked is, what church are you with? Because we as a society assume that the people who are doing good like that are doing it on behalf of a church. I would like to move society in a direction where doing good becomes the default, and where those people are helped by all of us as a function of a functional society and government programs, rather than relying on religions kind of holding a sandwich hostage while dangling a sermon that you have to aim for to get the sandwich. Just give them the damn sandwich.
But to Christopher Hitchens, who asked the question, or he presented the challenge, which I actually think is a good one. He said, name a right and moral action that a religious person could do that a non-religious person could also not do, And I'm like,
I don't know
think,
which of us came up with that first. I had a steak dinner on that same proposition once upon a time, but
really,
I'll give, for years on Atheist Experience, but
he stole
I'll give
it
Hitch
from
credit because I probably got it from him.
I don't know. What's your end zone? What's your goal in engaging? I mean, if you jump in, if you're going in it hoping that they will turn on a dime 180 and say, thank you so much for bringing this great wisdom to us, I've now reversed my position, you may be in for a lot of frustration. Are you wanting to plant seeds? Is there something else that you're trying to accomplish? What's the goal?
Are you asking me or Fishy?
My caller.
Yeah.
My call? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Fishy. I'm sorry.
Our caller.
So I think that I am one of the people that like to plant seed in people nowadays, especially when I heard a lot of debates nowadays from you guys, this channel, and also Joanne, and also Walsh, where some people hate him for it, but I feel most of his talk is kind of relevant to how the society works. So I do see that arguing against some position that are popular can be helpful in planting seeds.
If I can jump in quickly, there may be utility in nailing down definitions. What do you mean? What do they mean by religion? Like every religion, a specific religion? Well, if you can dial them down, then you can get into the specific conversations about what are the doctrines of that religion. What's the baggage? We can't talk about the positives without also talking about the negatives, right? You can't talk about churches going in and feeding the hungry and building shelters without talking about all the times that Christians have excused bigotry and oppression and even genocide using their God to do so, So I'm like, well, fine. If you want to talk about the pluses, we also have to talk about the minuses. You can't include the hits without the misses. There may be some usefulness in that.
I guess I gave them too many negative points, such as how people are not taking care of the earth because they eventually will go to the heavens, or people are not trying to fight for worsening life quality because they see that some people can be saved by religion, or even some don't want to fight the existing rules because religion tell them to not to disrespect the elderly in a way.
I think there are probably thousands of examples that you could draw from, but I would hesitate, if I were you, to go in with the idea that you are going to cause someone to reverse course. If you want to make the stand, to let them see a contrary position, I think that's healthy. Maybe you're planting seeds. I would lead with questions rather than accusations. I wouldn't necessarily walk in with a ton of declarative statements, but I would get people to, have to consider how they would defend a position. And if you find yourself getting sucked into a non-productive discussion, I would politely bow out and get on with the rest of my day.
All right. Oh, and by the way, the person also says that they've been through Richard Dawkins' style of atheism, so it is not a very useful way to think about religion. What they mean by that?
What in the world is a Richard Dawkins style of atheism? I don't even know what that is.
It's atheism coupled with transphobia.
And Elon Musk admiration, apparently.
Yeah.
And an admiration for cultural Christianity in Britain. and some
I
others.
wonder, without referencing Dawkins by name, so atheism is a position of not being convinced that a God exists, or possibly being convinced that no God exists, or some specific gods don't exist. But when people talk about doing atheism, I suspect that they're mostly talking about how we argue against or challenge the claims of religions. And there's lots of different ways to do that. My style, to the extent anybody call it a style, is different from Seth's, is different from Justin's, is different. Pick somebody. We're all going to do it slightly differently. And I don't know that there is a right way. And I don't even know that I have like one way. I've done it lots of different ways at different times of the years. And some people say I'm better now, worse now. I don't, all I want to do is be effective. And if that requires some changes, that's fine. I'd like to know exactly what they think is not the right way to do it, or maybe it's not productive, because if the goal is to get to the truth and either let people know that they have beliefs that aren't warranted so they can see, as I did, that my beliefs weren't warranted, or find out that they do have beliefs that are warranted so that I don't continue to be wrong about that. I don't know how you can do that wrong. You could certainly be, I care enough about truth and fallacies and bad art. I just wound up unfriending somebody on Facebook this morning who I'm sure we agree on the overwhelming majority of stuff. And this was just a minor thing, but they posted a bad, fallacious joke argument against Christian nationalism. And I called it out. And evidently I'm a dick that just can't enjoy humor. And I'm like, okay, I think that the fallacies being used here. And so I've seen a trend lately. I've seen this from, for example, John Fugelsang, who's a Christian and a comedian and an author and somebody I've respected and would love to have another. I called into a show once, but we've never sat down and had a conversation. But I'd love to have a conversation with John. And he wrote a book about, I think it's called Separation of Church and Hate. And it's a sensible take on Christianity and trying to recover Christianity from Christian nationalists and fundamentalist evangelicals and everything else. And while I can be happy that someone is trying to advocate for a better version of Christianity, like James Tallarico, he and I are going to agree on a vast majority of things, despite the fact that he's a Christian. I just don't find that those are consistent with biblical claims. I mean, the Bible's pretty straightforward, and it is not really subject to a whole lot of interpretation if you're honest, and yet people try to spin it. So if it says, if a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, they've committed an abomination and are deserving of death, which it does. It's very difficult to come in and say, yes, but, that was actually about, I don't know. Let's add an age element in there. Let's add a timeline element in there. And let's just say that, let's invent a new version where it's, well, that's up to God to sort out whether or not they've committed an abomination and kill them. That's not an instruction for me to actually kill them. And I would agree. It doesn't say, if it says they're deserving of death, that doesn't mean it's saying you should be the one to do it. Maybe you should, let go and let God type of thing. But when you try to have, I'm thrilled by the science-friendly, queer-friendly churches that we find all over the place. They are wonderful people doing wonderful things. And it both makes me happy and annoys me a little to hope that they are redefining Christianity. But let's be honest, they are redefining. This is a respin. This is not the biblical Christianity. Westboro Baptist Church is on stronger biblical footing than John Fugelsang is with regard to which verses they're going to cherry pick. I'm going to cherry pick, love thy neighbor and all this other stuff. You have to ignore some verses, some powerful verses in order to get there. And I'm damn glad they do. But we're entering a no true Christian fallacy regime, and it annoys the shit out of me. And I'm seeing, good people on left, liberal, progressive, LGBTQ, whatever, buying into this. And they either do not understand the gravity of it, or they're like, oh, I just saw it was funny, so I went with it. And you're allowed to do that. But I still have an objection because I care about truth and fallacies and this other stuff. And that's why I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So you have to figure out, Fishy, exactly what you're willing to put up with. And if they're trying to tell you that Christianity is A, B, and C, make sure that they're giving some account for all of the other Christian denominations and individuals who fundamentally disagree with them. And how can they demonstrate to anyone else that their version of Christianity is the right one? Because I don't think there is a right one. And I find it beneath contempt that we're spending time trying to find a right one and rehabilitate the label towards the right one, when there's no reason to think there's anything supernatural, no reason to think there's any God, no reason to think any version of Christianity is true. All it does is lend credibility to something that is fundamentally bad, and it's only the fact that there are good people doing it that keep it from being bad.
Okay. And I found a good. The person wrote, Dawkins is literally responsible for the strain of atheism that caused the non-Western cultures for being backwards in their spiritual traditions and native religions. So the person thinks that Dawkins is making up a huge part of the Western atheist movement. Maybe they are wrong here.
Well, if I'm understanding, I'm hearing a shade of some of what first of all, people who are on the outside, they lean into usually the first name they hear whenever it comes to atheism, which would be Richard Dawkins, which for so many decades was on the forefront of atheist activism. He was one of the new atheists of 2007, 2008. So I have heard a riff on, well, whatever Dawkins thinks is what atheists think. And I've heard atheists have simply left the religion of Christianity, Islam, etc., and now they're following another shepherd, and that shepherd is Richard Dawkins. And I think they often betray the shepherd sheep model that they have been pre-programmed to see the world in. Rather than say, well, maybe Seth went back and reverse engineered his religion and realized that it wasn't working. It's a lot easier for them to rationalize and say, well, he just sacrificed one prophet for another. And he went off to follow a new shepherd. And now he's got the guru. And I'm like, you don't know skeptics. You don't know atheists. To put everybody, what's that line? All generalities are false. So people are going to invoke anybody, whether it's Harris or Dennett or anybody else. But I think that's a distraction from whether or not we do or do not believe in a God as individuals.
Yeah, I was an atheist before I ever heard of Dawkins.
Sorry.
I was an atheist before I ever heard of Dawkins or Dostoevsky or any number of things. My process was one where I needed a good reason to justify my beliefs so that I could be a better Christian and witness to people. And in the process, I did read stuff from Ingersoll and Voltaire and some older voices, but I hadn't read Dostoevsky at that time. I didn't know who Dawkins was. Any number of people who, and I've shared a stage with Dawkins, and I've called him out for transphobic stuff. I clearly don't have a guru, and I don't want to be anybody's guru. I mean, it's you can't help the fact that there are people who, are going to look up to you or thank you for what you've done, and I appreciate that anything I've done has been appreciated, but nobody. Like, I would be a terrible guru. I would be a good emperor of the galaxy, but I would be a terrible guru.
Fishy, I appreciate your call very much. You be safe over there and let us know how it goes, okay?
All right.
All right.
I
Take care of
guess.
yourself. Whoops. So you brought up Jedi, and there are
Yeah.
people in the religion. I actually pulled up the website because I've written about this in the past. There is a religion, Jediism. And if you go to templeofthejediorder.org, you can read the doctrine of the order. Indulge me for just a second, and then we'll go back to the phones.
Go for
Jediism
it.
is a religion based on the observance of the Force, a ubiquitous and metaphysical power that a Jedi believes to be the underlying fundamental nature of the universe. Jediism finds its roots in philosophy similar to those presented in an epic space opera called Star Wars. It is a religion in and of itself. Almost done. The Jedi religion is an inspiration and a way of life for many people throughout the world who take on the mantle of Jedi. They apply the principles, ideas, philosophies, and teachings of Jediism in a practical manner. And it goes through kind of a tenets of what they believe, right? Focus, knowledge, and wisdom. But I find these very nebulous terms. What is the Force as it relates to the rest of the universe? How does one tap into the Force? How does the Force communicate what these tenets would actually be? Can you find them elsewhere? Or is it just an aesthetic? I interviewed years ago the guy who founded the Church of the Latter-day Dude. Now,
Yeah.
anybody who, like me, is a fan of the Big Lebowski, the Coen brothers, I love that movie. It's one of the most quotable films of all time. Well, there's an actual religion called Dudism, and I am an ordained Dudist priest. And I think I got an ordination certificate or something, but there's an aesthetic there that is chill, relax, don't let things get to you, be in the moment. Some might argue that it's sort of sanctioned laziness. They might be right. But for them, it's kind of an aesthetic of philosophy. I don't think they're tapping into anything supernatural, but it sounds like Jediism is looking for or trying to tap into an actual force. Do you know anything about these guys, Matt, or am I the only one who's interested in Jediism?
I put Jediism, I put it in the same category as like Pastafarian. I get that for the people who are in it, it may be more significant than that, but I won't spend any more time on Jediism, generally speaking, than I would on Pastafarian. And it's no slight. I'm sure there are worse religions one could find themselves associated with, but it's like some people are. It's like we're searching for a solution to a problem that isn't a problem. Like, we don't have a good religion. That's not a problem. You don't have to go make a good religion. You can just be good without the religion.
This brings up, and Vin, I will get to you on the switchboard, and the phone lines are open. We've yet to see a theist or someone who is spiritual dial in. We would love to talk to you. If you approach us in good faith, we'll have a spirited and respectful conversation. We'd love a chance to chat. The phone number and the web link are on screen and in the show notes of the broadcast. One of the challenges, and I will say that the God delusion was a seminal part of my journey. I mean, like, literally caught me at the right time. The work of Hitchens, et cetera. It sounds like a cliche, but I will say that these Dan Barker's book, Godless, some debates I'd seen online altered the trajectory of my life. And I guess in many ways they were what they needed to be at the time. But if I go back and look, I was watching a Hitch debate recently, and he often talks about religion. Religion is this, religion is that. And I've realized that when you say religion, it's monumentally reductive. Is it a theistic religion? Is it a deistic religion? Is it a philosophy? Is it a secular religion? I mean, half of all people who identify as Jew or practicing Judaism say that they have serious doubts about or don't believe in a God. Theirs is a cultural faith. What about the Satanic Temple? That's a non-theistic religion. It's an aesthetic. It speaks to their philosophy. So if you say, well, the meme verse is full of this stuff, religion is this. And I'm like, I don't think this fits on a bumper sticker because you got to define religion, right?
Yeah. And it's even in that last discussion, we're still speaking kind of about the normative theistic type religions we're engaged with, and probably I am thinking more often about Christianity, Judaism. I'm almost thinking about them in order, like of popularity, just as that's what you're most likely to interact with. I don't know how there could be a deistic. So I think deism is silly because deists are basically claim to find that which they think is unfindable. They've discovered the undiscoverable. There's a God that doesn't interact in any detectable way with reality, and they've detected it. That's the only way you could have a rational belief in that. Or it's a necessary being, and so. But we've been down the argument or the line with those arguments. But because of that, if it doesn't interact with reality, even if you infer it as a necessary cause, you can't have any sort of doctrine tied to it. And so when you're looking at religion, what are the doctrines? Like when you read out, on Jediism, they took what they learned from the Star Wars movie and put together something that is consistent with the values that they see. It's funny because I think that there are some people who were clearly Jedis who did not necessarily live up to those things. But, I'm not the super Star Wars geek, and I like it all. I just don't know what the benefit of the religion would be. And there's other religions that I find strange, even to the point where years ago, you'll remember this, there was the North Texas Church of Free Thought. And I think it still exists. And it was before we had like
Oasis
and forget the name of the other one. But it was the North Texas Church of Free Thought. And there were people who objected to calling it a church. And the objections were kind of twofold. There were people who didn't want to refer it to a church because they just hate the word church and stay away from it. But also there were people who were pointing out that church is necessarily Protestant in its origin. That if you're talking about Catholicism, you're more likely to talk about Mass. If you're talking about Judaism, you're more likely to talk about a synagogue. All of these others are going to have slightly different terms. And so it was very Protestant in its origin. And it gets back to those people who say, oh, are you a Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist or a Muslim atheist? And no, I'm an atheist with regard to all of them.
Yeah.
And so it does behoove us to when somebody says, hey, let's talk about religion, to say, okay, let's define what we're talking about. But I think it's also fair that, in a lot of these, you can make a couple fair assumptions to start a conversation. And when you realize that it's not fitting that mold, you can pause and be like, are we talking about the same thing, and do the definitions?
I promise I will get to you, then. Indulge me just another minute. We were talking about the progressive Christians who have made a God really in their own image, which humans have always done. I would be interested to see James Tallarico, John Pavlovitz, Amanda Tyler, Dr. Kristen Dumais, etc., go back and attempt to sell their progressive humanistic brand of Christianity in the medieval era. They would have been executed publicly for heresy, right? By saying, Jesus, he wouldn't have judged gay people, et cetera, et cetera. I just did a speech recently about how human beings like to make gods in their own image, and I did a whole exploration of Jesus. If I was to walk into a white bread, corn-fed Protestant Oklahoma Southern Baptist church today, and I was to show them a portrait of that Middle Eastern Jesus that was done back in 2005, or, there is an African American Jesus, so there's an Asian version of Jesus, there's a Native American Jesus, there's a Hindu, there's a Muslim Jesus. If I was to walk in with anything other than blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white Jesus, I would probably get the shit kicked out of me because they have made a God in their own image. And I think it's it's explainable. Human beings want to see themselves reflected in the cultures that they live in. We seek validation, reinforcement. We find comfort And many people find that if something or someone is different, there's a dissonance that causes them to squirm. I think it's totally understandable. We talked about how there were no early depictions of what Jesus, had he existed, even looked like until the 3rd or 4th century. And then that Jesus looked like the Caesars, right, in Rome, with more of the Caesar-esque look with the hair and the features. And this became the norm for who knows how long. And when I see Tallarico, et cetera, I so appreciate his heart. But he's really whitewashing, literally, what Jesus, according to the scriptures, is. So I struggle with it because part of me is like, I love his heart, but he's wrong on the doctrine that he's selling. And I wrestle with, I mean, I'll take him, but I sure would like to sit down and have a doctrinal conversation about the Bible sometime, if that opportunity presented itself. So,
Yeah, I find that I'd love to do that, but I don't want to keep the caller waiting any longer
all
than we
right,
have to.
all right. Vin has been most patient, dialing in from Poland. Did I say your name correctly? VIN?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So
Thanks
glad
for
you're
having
here.
me.
You're on with Matt and Seth. What's on your mind?
So I wanted to ask about religion being harmful, specifically as it relates to coping with personal issues and trauma. I surround myself with a lot of troubled people, and while most of them are atheists, because I am, and we just gravitate to each other, I also live in Poland, which is a very religious country. And there are a lot of people who rely heavily on Catholicism, Christianity, and that is somewhat easy to dismantle because the texts, like the fundamentals of that religion, of those religions, are have harmful elements that you can point out. Um, but when it comes to spirituality and maybe more vague religious concepts, um, it gets, I feel, a little bit more difficult to talk about religion to people. And I also wanted to ask, is it harmful if it helps a person find comfort? Because religion can help somebody process what they went through. But I guess I'm not sure whether it's always harmful to seek comfort in it or not.
If I think the question has to be, does it matter if it's true? If I have lost someone dear to me, a spouse, a parent, a child, and the idea that goodbye is not forever, one day we will see each other again. And that balms my grief and becomes a coping mechanism for me. It's a stair step, perhaps, out of grief and despair. It could be argued that because that is not a belief that will go out and necessarily alter my approach to the rest of the world, but it's very much an internal belief. It could be argued that the fantasy is part of my healing. I just don't think it's healthy for us to embrace fictions to deal with the world. I mean, if someone is motivated by a higher power as part of the Alcoholics Anonymous model, well, they're still doing all the work. Wouldn't it be better for them to root themselves in the fact that it is their victory, it is their journey, it is their responsibility? If someone prays, there is a meditative vibe to prayer that may have a physically calming effect on you. Does that mean that prayer works? Is the baggage when it comes to prayer worth it? Does it matter if it's true? And I worry as well, finally, about this sort of bigotry of lowered expectations. Some people, they just can't deal with life unless they hold to mythology. And I don't think that's a healthy way to approach how we cope with a very difficult life. I really think if it's not true, or there's no evidence to believe it's true, maybe we should find another way to achieve the same goal. I would welcome Matt Dillahunty's thoughts on this one, though.
Yeah. I'm happy. So, like, for example, the example I'll use is something like 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. I have huge problems with them. I find them to be deceptive, delusional bullshit that replaces one addiction with another. They don't publish their recidivism rates. Basically, if you fail, you're the one that failed. The program didn't fail you. You failed the program. And they're like, oh, I'm helpless and I can't do anything and I need to depend on a higher power. And I find all of that to be not true and not good. However, anyone who's dealing with substance addiction problems, who is currently of the position and the belief that only something like a 12-step program is going to keep them sober, then I would like those programs to be available and for that person to participate in it. I'd also like us to work on changing the social, the general perception of this, so that there are other options, and that people begin to learn the facts about it. When it comes to people who are dealing with grief and loss, and they're finding solace in a particular religious belief, I'm glad they found a method to deal with it. I just think they've genuinely picked a really bad method. Religions have poisoned every conversation about death and dying that humans have had for millennia. And I think that if religions didn't control the narrative on what life is and what death is and whether or not there's something after death or what you can or can't know about it, I think if religions weren't controlling that narrative, then we would all be able to cope with life and death as factual things. The reality is, I'm alive. Someday I'm going to die. Everyone I know, they're all going to die. At some point, someone I care about is going to die. It's happened before, it'll happen again. If religions teach me that they've gone off to a special, better place and someday I'll get to be with them, maybe, if I'm good or if I'm on the list or if I was saved or whatever, and that's not true, then that means everything that I should have thought and felt about my experience with that person and the loss and grief that I would normally go through has been stolen from me and replaced with a fiction. And I think that we would all be better with understanding and coping with death if we dealt with it honestly. That, for example, I don't have any grandparents remaining at all. I had a grandmother that died at 91. I played cards with her months before she died. I loved her dearly. I still love her. I miss her. I get to remember the things that we did. I don't have to imagine that she's in heaven. I don't have to imagine that we're ever going to see each other. Everything about our interactions that happened while I'm alive remains a part of my memories, although they're going to fade. And I'm sure I've forgotten tons of things. But that's okay. The notion that we need a fictional story that everybody gets this perfect happy ending, or that we have this hope of a happy ending, doesn't do anything to make this life better. It doesn't do anything to make it suck any less that I don't get to see my grandmother. And so I'm happy if people can't find another way to deal with it. But I think we as a society should be working on more and better ways to handle grief, to handle addiction, to handle depression, to handle nihilism and fears of that. And it's difficult for us to make progress on those things when the societal defaults are still to give all credence and power and special standing to religions that have never demonstrated that they're true, whose leaders have never demonstrated that they have an expertise in anything, and who continually give advice to people that should be coming from a scientifically based therapist relying on actual facts instead of a priest relying on a magical story.
I absolutely agree. What you said about this being an issue with society as a whole, I think really struck a chord with me because Poland specifically, we have a separation of church and state, but only in theory. Our country as a whole, most of the people are very religious. It's sort of shifting now, but as I was growing up, as my parents were growing up, it's been very, very intense and still is ingrained in people in a way that I think is very harmful. So, for example, a couple months ago, my cousin passed. We hadn't been close for a long time. We grew up together, and he was an atheist for sure as well. His mother was an atheist. I don't know about his dad, and he still had a funeral held in a church, and we don't usually do eulogies like personally. The pastor delivers a eulogy, and it felt like putting on a show, like so impersonal and disrespectful. And there's really no way to talk about it with people to bring up how it's harmful because it's so just such a core part of people. And I guess my another question is, how do you talk to someone who's dealing with something difficult? Maybe not in the moment, but like has coped with something awful through religion and still reverts back to it when thinking about it. What do you say except nodding along? Because usually I just think, live and let live. But I also feel like it's just it feels shitty to to just see somebody stuck in one place and not progressing with their feelings because they just focus on one concept.
Yeah, I had a friend that I worked with. This one's going to be a little difficult, but I'm not very good at adapting how I talk about things based on who I'm talking to. Like, I genuinely don't care if we're family. I mean, yes, I do make a slight exception for my mom, but I don't care if we're related. I don't care if we're friends. I don't care if you're famous. I don't care. None of those things. I am me, and I like the fact that people pretty much know what they're going to get. Although occasionally somebody's surprised by something. But I had a friend whose 15-year-old got cancer, and we worked together. And there were a lot of people in her life who were religious. And as he died at 16, and as we were there at work, we would take breaks. We would go down to the smoking area and talk and everything else. And she would come to me to have the conversations that she couldn't have with all the religious people around her, because they were saying things like, God's going to heal him. Here comes a miracle heal. Or right up to after he died, it was God needed an angel, or any number of things. And instead, I was the one person that she could come to, and we were able to discuss pain management. We were able to discuss scientific treatments. We were able to discuss dealing with religious family members saying things that bothered her and how best to address it, because she wasn't an atheist necessarily. And I don't have to have, like, not all my friends are atheists. We would have the conversations and she would ask my advice and then take it or ignore it. But she always knew when she came to me that she wasn't going to get smoke blown up her ass. She wasn't going to get anything dishonest, that I was going to evaluate what she was going through, the scientific information. I was going to offer the help that I was able to offer, which was to be the one person that wasn't spouting bullshit or sophistry at her. And when there's nothing else to say, to be the person that she could have a hug and a cry with about what was going on, and would say, yeah, this is fucking awful. Fuck cancer. This is, I can't even, what kind of world do we live in where a bright 15-year-old gets to suffer for a year or so, and then everybody else suffers because that person's no longer around, rather than the dehumanizing treatment of illness and death that religions tend towards. My view was, as a humanist, this kid had value and was important, and that we needed to do everything in our power to let him know that, and to know that we were trying to support him and every effort to cure him, and that if it didn't work and he died, he would be well remembered and well loved by the people who were around him, and that she would have support of people who were going to use their hands to do something rather than folding them in prayer, and who would get up off of their knees and stop spouting things about angels and actually do the things that needed to be done, and just be there, and sometimes shut the fuck up and just sit quietly with somebody. And I will always, I'm not particularly proud of too many things I've said or done, but I am proud of how I handled and helped with that, because I went into it stunned and thinking, I'm going to have absolutely nothing to offer this person. I can't do it, because my brain was still locked in the, you're a Southern Baptist. This is what you pray about. This is how you do this. I was finding my way out of it. And it turns out it was a big help to both of us. And Jazz, if you're watching, I love you.
That's that's very sweet and also very eye-opening. I never thought about it in the sense of offering somebody space to talk about different bits of loss. Is there time for one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what I want to lastly ask about is, how do you talk about this with somebody who's with other things than grief? Because grief is, I feel, a little bit different to compartmentalize and go through. But for me personally, the biggest struggle when it comes to talking about religion is with my mom. She's vaguely Christian, mostly spiritual, nothing very concrete. But she went through, she had a really horrible life for most of the time. And she's kind of deprogrammed herself. She doesn't rely on religion as much, but it's still what she diverts to seek comfort. And we can have very productive conversations. She does go to therapy, so it's not her only means of escape. But at the same time, whenever religion comes up, I feel like we kind of hit a brick wall, and it's hard to talk about it when the struggle is ongoing. It's not just losing a person and then you live with the loss. It's like actively, daily dealing with disorders and issues that came from the life she had, and it goes so deep that I suppose I don't want to tell her that it's wrong for her to believe that, to seek something else to find comfort in that may be more anchored in reality, because it's not healthy, like Seth said, but it's, if it works, it works. But on the other hand, like, where does it go? Like, how far can this take her? How much can she actually rely on that um to find comfort? And I don't know how to talk about it with her in a way that wouldn't make her upset, but would also be productive. Um,
Well, if I
so
may,
to kind of, of course.
I hear two angles. First of all, it is one of the reasons that I don't lead with "I'm an atheist," which speaks to what I don't believe in. I'm a humanist, right? I am convinced that as long as there is suffering, as long as there is confusion, as long as there are problems, people are going to look to the skies. They're going to call out and, grasp on to a notion that there is a master planner somewhere and it's all going to be better one day. And I think, that's one of our best motivations for eliminating suffering on this planet, is because as long as there is and people feel desperate, they're going to be, for lack of a better way of saying it, they're going to be fair game for any unsubstantiated truth claim or promise or savior figure that comes along. I don't think it's on you to change her mind. I think I like the idea of you simply being there and reminding her. It's like when I had somebody go in for treatment and they positively responded. My family was like, "Praise Jesus." And I jumped in and I said, "Well, let us not forget the trained physicians and the support staff, the nurses, the scientists who developed the medications, and the advancements in our knowledge that helped to bring this. Thanks so much to the people at the hospital. And without, you know, insulting their God and putting them back on their heels, I was able to add my perspective. I want you to look up a speech that I gave online. It's on YouTube. It's called The Brick Wall Brain. Just Google my name, Seth Andrews, The Brick Wall Brain. And I get into identity beliefs. If your mom's a cultural believer, there's a good chance that facts are problematic. They're not producing the results that you want because you are speaking to someone who has embraced her faith as part of her identity. I identify as a God believer. I am a Christian. And so, arguing it as far as the dogma is concerned isn't really how she approaches her faith. This is part of her tribe. It's part of her group. It's part of the fabric of her life. It's part of the cellular structure of her body and her mind. So she's going to go fight, flight, or freeze whenever that is challenged. But understanding how identity beliefs work, I think, helps us to better approach people in a way where they don't feel immediately threatened, and yet they can still be challenged in a productive way. So check it out. It's called The Brick Wall Brain. Maybe it will help you, maybe not. Okay?
Okay. I will check it out, definitely. And I think that's all for me. Thank you
Thank you, Vin.
very much for your input. It was very helpful. I
Wow.
appreciate it a lot. You guys have a nice night today. I'm not sure what time it is in the US.
It's all right. Lovely call. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Thanks much, Vin.
In fact, because we've had 2 or 3 atheist agnostics, whatever. I mean, we've got a theist coming up, but honestly, if you've got a question or a point, I don't give a shit if you're an atheist or not. Call us because we've had some really good stuff. And the reason I like it is because it provides an opportunity for us to address how we can approach believers outside of the show. whether it's in our own conversations with family and friends, whether we're going off into our own platforms, if it's somebody at the office, if it's a neighbor or whatnot. I think these discussions provide our listeners and viewers with information that they can then perhaps take out into their own discussions. And there's great utility in that. So even if I don't get more theists on the show, if an atheist or an agnostic or someone else wants to dial in to talk about tactics, perspectives, definitions, etc., I'll take that.
There's somebody in chat named Vladimir that says, why won't you pick up to talk about how God is real from an orthodox epistemology? Well, you're welcome to call in and defend it. I'm not aware of what you necessarily mean by orthodox epistemology, but I care about epistemologies that are reliable. And so if your orthodox epistemology is a reliable path to truth, I'd like to know about it. And if it's not, if it just begins with, hey, I have these views and God is consistent with my views, that's not a sound epistemology. But don't you dare come into chat suggesting I won't pick up to talk about something when we literally have lines open and have been begging you and others to call in, and you haven't. I'm not the one that's dropping the ball here.
Say hi to the person in the chat who said that I look like Jeff Goldblum. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
You should start working on your Jeff Goldblum impression.
I can do impressions. It's not the first time I've heard that. And I'm like, is it that true? So now I have to go look it up. By the way, I love Jeff Goldblum. Ever since Cronenberg's The Fly, I've been a fan of Jeff Goldblum. So I'll take it.
The Fly was probably... Did you ever see Mr. Frost?
Yes, but it's not even available to rent. There's only a low-res version of it now. The whole movie is on YouTube.
Yes, I have it on VHS because that was the only way I could get it, and I don't know if it'll ever be released again. But yes, it's watchable on YouTube. I genuinely loved watching it from what I remember, but I haven't watched it in many years.
I mean, it's very much a product of its time. But if you ever thought Jeff Goldblum could not be sinister, watch Mr. Frost on YouTube. It's super low res. It's a low res scan. I think it may even be in 4:3. I can't remember if it's widescreen.
I think it is, yeah.
I thought it was pretty good. By the way, speaking of film, Tom, I will get to you. I was speaking on a recent show. I know Chuck Norris recently passed away at the age of 86, and we were talking about his life and his legacy, for better and for worse, and the fact that he was a legit world champion martial artist, and he got his start in all of these, martial arts films, and became Walker, Texas Ranger, and then became a Christian nationalist and a bigot and a very problematic person. I was talking about this film that I remember from 44 years ago. It's 1982. It's called Silent Rage, and it's a classic. It's the Citizen Kane of bad movies. And in the film, there's a psychopathic killer who murders everybody in a house with an axe. And then he's shot almost to death. He almost dies. And for some reason, his psychiatrists, they take him in, and the psychiatrists are working on him. But the psychiatrists have also been working on a genetic regeneration drug. And they decide it's a good idea to take the mass murderer, the axe murderer, and inject him with the magical serum that will make him invincible. And of course, he wakes up and rips all of the devices off his body, and then he rushes out. And the rest of the movie is either Chuck Norris and him getting into roundhouse kick fights, or Chuck Norris getting naked with his girlfriend. It's just a classic of bad films. Silent Rage. I
found a 4K upscale Mr. Frost on YouTube that's only been there for a little while. I posted a link in chat, but
email it to me. I must see it. I must have it.
I'll put it in chat in vMix right now, but okay. Let's get to Tom.
All right, Tom, you've been most kind, waiting on us to yammer on about Silent Rage. What's on your mind, Tom?
Yeah, I just had a quick thought here that I've been thinking about here lately. But that atheism might be a death cult. And you guys don't realize
atheism might be a death cult. Can you explain that for me?
Well, I can prove it with stats.
You can prove it with stats. What I find strange is I don't understand how atheism, which is not believing in a God, could be a cult when cults are ideological organizations, often with a charismatic leader that make demands on the individual. And atheism doesn't make any demands on any individual. Cults don't tend to run call-in shows asking folks to defend why they're not in the cult. Atheism has no tenets, no dogma, no governing body, no controlling body, no doctrines. And there's no way for atheism to impose things that it doesn't have. And since I, like many humanists, I'm not looking forward to death or dying, how can I possibly be in a death cult if I'm focused on making the one and only life I know I'm going to get better?
Well, I mean, I'm just kind of looking at, you're kind of looking at the definition from like the dictionary or whatever.
I'm kind of,
Which is
yes,
kind
I'm
of our
looking at
truth.
reality and not trying to
Right,
spin
yeah.
something. So explain to me, how can I be in a death cult?
Well, I was just going off like the birth rates. And if you look at the most religious area of the world, they have a higher birth rate that actually can support life.
Does anything about
And
atheism dictate to anyone whether or not they should be having kids?
No, but if you just play out the
No.
birth
So
rate.
you don't need to put a but in at the end of it, Tom. The answer is no. You can't make a case that we're doing something. There's something about it that reduces the birth rate if that's not a tenet of the doctrine. It may be consistent. It may be that a bunch of people who lack an interest in having kids find their way into more secular things. But also there's plenty of atheists with kids. But also you haven't demonstrated that a declining birth rate is a symptom of a death cult. So how do you do that?
Well, if you just play the birth rate that's going on in the world right now, if we just keep playing on with one birth per woman, sooner or later, everybody would die out because we don't have a high enough birth rate to reproduce.
What the hell does that have to do with atheism or death cults? Because the birth rate increases and decreases based on a number of different societal factors. What does this have to do with atheism?
Because atheists has the lowest birth rate in the world.
Okay,
and the
so
countries
what?
that are the most atheists have the lowest birth rate in the world.
I'm sorry, but that's correlation, not causation. And even if it were caused by atheism, you'd have to show that it's a bad thing.
Right. And I said possibility. I didn't say for sure, but it could be a possibility that you are part of
No,
the death cult.
you haven't demonstrated that it's a possibility. You haven't even demonstrated that's a possibility. I love the fact that you come in and you make, I'm sorry, I'm still talking. I know it's kind of difficult for you. I know it's difficult for you, but I'm actually still talking. I love when people come in and make a claim, and then when I point out the flaws in that claim, they're like, well, I didn't say it was an absolute certainty. I just, maybe it's possible. Well, you haven't even demonstrated that it's possible, that it's bad, or that I'm in a death cult. So explain to me how it's possible that I'm in a death cult.
Because if you play out the birth rate to its end, and the most atheists are not having enough children, it's, you're in a death cult. People are going to die.
No, Tom. I reject your unfounded, ignorant, bald-ass assertion that you're in a death cult if your group has a lower birth rate. That is an asinine Thomism that has nothing to do with the definition of cults, death cults, or anything at all. It's something you pulled right out of your ass.
That's something I was thinking about. You're right.
It's a very Elon Musk comment, Tom.
You want Elon?
It's very Elon Musk.
Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. But it was just
explain.
I thought I'd throw it out there.
Well, how about you
understand? So are you saying
about theism?
Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
I just like, if instead of calling in to talk shit about atheists and getting literally everything about it wrong, why don't you defend theism?
Well, I wasn't really talking shit about it. I was just looking at the statistics.
You don't think it? No. You don't think it's shit talking to be suggesting that we're in a death cult?
Well, it might be helping you out if you look at things and say, "Hey, maybe we are."
Oh, you know what? This reminds me of that Bill Hicks joke about the riots when those cops were put on trial for beating the shit out of that dude, and they're like, "Hey, it all depends on how you look at it. If you play the video backwards, you'll see us help him up and send him on his way." I live in reality, Tom. You're a shit-talking atheist, and you're doing it while knowing nothing and presenting nothing but your personal thoughts that don't tie to reality. How about we defend theism instead?
Well, I mean, I can't really defend that, but
Okay, then go
nobody can
away.
prove it. Well, okay, if you want to do that, sure.
I love the fact that you think nobody can prove it. So basically you're admitting that you have a belief that doesn't have a rational justification, and you're so confident that it doesn't have a rational justification, you're now asserting that nobody can provide a rational justification, which is something you can't do, which makes you even more absurd and cartoonish. This is like your 14th call, and you have yet to do anything of substance. I'm
playing catch
do you
up.
have any way to defend it?
Is the assertion that because birth rates, and I haven't seen the statistics, but birth rates among non-believers are less, that eventually we will unbreed ourselves out of existence, and that makes us a death cult?
Yeah. Humans, let's say all humans just continue to be atheists, because the world's becoming more of an atheist world.
No, it's not, sir. No, no. I'm not going to let you keep stating things as fact that are demonstrably not true. Atheists do not represent the majority of the population at all. That is so horribly wrong. I never can take you seriously, Tom. Can you present some facts that are actually true?
Yeah, look it up. Atheism is becoming more popular. I didn't say it's more popular than theism. I say it's becoming more popular.
Oh my gosh.
And because becoming more popular, the birth rates are going down because more people are believing in atheism, which is, like I say, could be a death cult.
Okay.
And more people are believing in atheism. That's what
No, Tom. I need you to demonstrate that because atheism is increasing in popularity, that this has in fact impacted the birth rate. That this tiny proportion of the population that represents somewhere between 1% and 14% right now, that because it has increased slightly, that this is significantly affecting the birth rate. Go for it.
Well, I'm still working on that. But
maybe instead of calling in with stuff you're still working on that does not in any way map to reality and is absurd on the face. Nobody has to go look anything up to know that a tiny group of a tiny portion of the population, while it may be slightly more popular, has significantly impacted the birth rate. So your claims about what it can do or will do are right out of your ass. And your assertions that there's some problem with the declining birth rate is right out of your ass. And you're ignoring the actual birth rate increasing and decreasing for a number of different factors across great periods of time. So you just genuinely don't have a clue what you're talking about. And you think that you hold an irrational position that nobody can defend. Why should anybody listen to you about anything, Tom?
I think he may be part of an ass cult. I'm just saying. It's out of his ass. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
No, I said it was just a thought. You know, like Einstein's theory of relativity, that started out as a thought too. So you can't knock somebody for having a thought.
Well, you know what, Tom?
Most great ideas just start out as a thought.
Yeah, you know what else starts out as a thought? Every wrong thought anybody's ever had. Don't go lumping yourself in with Einstein yet, buddy. Einstein actually did some research before he started presenting his ideas.
I'm sure he did.
Thanks, Tom.
And you haven't. Oh, embarrassing.
May the Lord bless you and keep you, Tom.
Yeah.
Thanks for telling atheists what they are, Tom. And have a wonderful day.
I didn't tell that.
You said we were in a death cult.
Oh, we might be in a death cult.
Oh, forgive me. That wasn't a definitive statement.
Because Tom's not going to be too declarative when he knows he's just talking shit and making it up.
All right.
That's something to think about. I'm sure you probably won't. But
no, it's nothing to think about, Tom. I have actual things to think about, not speculative bullshit that is demonstrably false on its face. The fact that 2% of the population who still have kids and do not in any way anticipate looking forward to death and do not have any sort of doctrine that would in any way encourage people not to have kids is somehow reducing the death rate demonstrates how absolutely fucking clueless you are.
Well, I thought.
Just something to think about, Tom.
It's barely a thought. But thanks for having barely a thought. When you get a full thought, when you get like a fully formed thought that's backed up by evidence, Call us back. I see you haven't called since like September of 2025. Maybe we'll hear from you again in another 9 months when you have another thought. That seems to be
just
the
love
rate
it.
at which thoughts appear in your head.
Somebody comes up with what they consider to be a radical idea, and then they say, well, the theory of this by this great scientist was also once considered around. Galileo, he dared to admit that the sun didn't revolve around the earth, and he was persecuted. He was an outlier. I am like Galileo. I just love that position. It's so arrogant.
Yep.
So arrogant.
Oh, they laughed at Einstein too. Yeah. They also laughed at the idiot with the sandwich board out on the street, and they laughed at the guy who said that he had solved perpetual motion for the 19th millionth time that we've proven it wrong. It's
Remember
just
back
weird.
when somebody said they had figured out cold fusion, which would solve the world's energy problems? They laughed at, and of course the scientist came forward and said, "We tried to replicate this result, and they're all full of shit." What a radical idea cold fusion was. Before I get to the next call, FYI, we've got Jimmy's show coming up, Calling It Now. That's going to start at 4 o'clock Central today. We've got The Line After Dark. I want to make sure I get the hosts right on this. Forrest Valkai and Owen Morgan. That's 7 o'clock tonight Central. Tomorrow night, Skeptalk, John Gleason and Justin DZ. Chewed Gum. On Tuesday with Alyssa Lube and Taylor SH. Matt's back for the Hang Up on Wednesday with Justin, and then Ben and Riverboat Jack for the Transatlantic Call-In Show on Thursday. These are broadcasting on the line, so like and subscribe and share, and get ready because it's going to be a roller coaster of a week on the broadcast. I do have room on the switchboard if there's another theist or non-theist who has something to say. Looky. It's Kevin dialing in from New York. 716. Kevin, are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm there.
I'm so glad you're there.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being a part of the show. You're on with Matt and Seth. What are you thinking?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk you, but I thought that the topic that you guys brought up for today was really interesting. So I wanted to throw in my 2 cents about that.
We are a quiver. What do you want to talk about?
Well, you guys brought up the subject of whether or not faith is good.
We did?
Well, I'm sorry?
It was the
I think we were talking about whether or not a religious belief could balm or provide a coping mechanism for someone and whether or not that was healthy. But is that how you're using faith?
Well, no, I just was going along with the simple question, is it good or not?
Faith in what?
Before I continue,
Okay. Define faith, I guess.
is faith. Well, to be completely honest, I don't know the literal definition of it, but I was going along with how people use it, basically. But before I continue, would you agree with me that the word faith and how people use it can be used both inside and outside religion?
Yes. My definition of faith is the excuse people use for believing something when they aren't able to present a good reason. Because if you believe something for a good reason and somebody says, why do you believe that? You present the good reason. And if you don't have a good reason, you can make an appeal to faith.
It's called faith because it's not knowledge, Kevin.
Yes, that's right. My thoughts on that sort of deviate a little bit because I agree with what you said, that people should have a good reason for the faith that they have. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes they don't. But when it's followed through to its conclusion, when people are using faith, it's brought to that conclusion that they're having that faith based on whatever they have faith about is going to work out. And so I think that it is useful in that aspect because, well, first of all, it's like I told
Kevin?
the call screener, like I think that
Kevin.
Yes.
So you said you talked about using faith. I don't know how one uses faith, but you said they have faith based on what they have faith about is going to work out. I don't mean, I promise I'm not trying to be a dick. That is an absolutely useless explanation because it's just circular. It's saying people use faith because they have faith that what they have faith in is going to work out. But they could be wrong about whether or not what they have faith in is going to work out. So if faith can lead to correct and incorrect positions, then faith is not a reliable path to truth, right?
That's correct. That's not the line of thinking that I was going along with, and I didn't mean to actually explain it that way. It's because I agree with you that some people can take on faith along with a line of thinking of not realizing what the outcome is going to be, but acting as though it will. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
No, I don't.
Well, Kevin, how is that knowledge? Like you talked about it, coming to a conclusion that your faith is real. Well, if you're coming to a conclusion, are you not reasoning your way to a conclusion? And if you had a good reason, you would not require faith.
That's not what I was thinking about at all. I was trying to avoid trying to use flowery language, like how I said with the call screener, because even with the call screener, I described faith as a life-giving concept.
I don't know what that means.
The reason why I say it like that is because the opposite of that is if somebody doesn't live with a type of faith, whether it's inside or outside religion, then the opposite of what I'm trying to say is then that person would be
Kevin, stop.
Stunned into inaction.
Kevin, I don't know what you mean by faith is a life-giving concept.
It's a motivator.
Are motivators good?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. Motivators are sometimes good and sometimes not good. How would you show that faith is a good motivator?
Faith is a good motivator because, like I was trying to explain to you, if we even take into consideration what the conclusion of that is supposed to be, then I'm sorry, I got I got lost along the way there.
Oh,
yeah,
you're not the only one,
so far doesn't make sense. You said faith is good because if we even take into consideration what the conclusion of that is supposed to be, and I'm sorry, that sentence also doesn't make sense. What makes faith what makes faith good as a motivating concept?
All right, I'm going to try to say it simply. The reason why I think it's good is because, say I take on a project. I'm going to give an example. This is the best way I can do it. Say I take on a project. I don't know whether that project is going to work out, but I'm going to act as though it will work out. That's what I mean by
that's not faith.
Going along with.
That's not faith. So
how isn't it?
I'm getting ready to explain to you, Kevin. Having confidence that is proportional to the evidence is rational. So I have a friend that does leather working, and I messed around with it a little bit when I was a kid, and Arden has expressed an interest in it. And I haven't touched leatherworking tools or leather stuff in ages, but I have a sneaking suspicion that sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll probably do some little project. I know that there's some chance that I could completely mess up the first project and destroy it. And I know that there's a chance that it could be kind of successful or partially successful, or that it could be greatly successful. I could find that it's second nature, old hand, and oh, this is just obvious and easy. Instead of having faith that I'm going to be successful, instead, I am confident in the abilities that I have based on the evidence that I have of past things. That is not faith. That is a trust, a confidence that is based on evidence. And so the reason I'm confident is because I have evidence of likely outcomes and I have rationally considered the available outcomes. I did the same thing when I went in for open heart surgery. I trusted the doctors and I had confidence that I was in the hands of the best doctors that I could be in at that time. And I had I wasn't confident that I would survive. I wasn't confident that I would ever wake up. Instead, I had a rational expectation that this was my best chance to survive. No faith required. I still don't see what you mean by faith or why it's good.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying, and I focus on how you said you have physical reasons behind the confidence, line of thinking. But as opposed
When I
to what
heard
you
you
were
talk
saying,
about
you could
starting
also
a
come up with
project,
a line of. You could also come up with a line of reasons not to do that, and so that's why faith is good.
when I heard you
Because
talk about
it
beginning a
really comes down
project
to what
with
your
a
mind is
hope,
focused on.
when I heard you talking about you starting a project with the hope that it would all work out, I hear hope. I don't hear that you have faith it's going to work out. You are diligently working toward an end, and you certainly hope it is successful. Hope and faith not being the same thing. And of course, the larger question is faith in what? Like you're using the word faith. Faith in what?
Faith is only follow through when it reaches through to its conclusion, in my opinion. But what's your definition? What's the difference between hope and faith?
Matt defined faith. I don't think hope really needs a whole lot of scrutiny. I hope this call leads us in a productive direction. I hope we get to live in a democracy. I hope that there is some sushi in my future for dinner tonight. I don't think that's a difficult concept, right? But hoping and saying, well, there will be sushi because I have faith. Those are two different conversations, are they not?
Yeah, but I also think of it in different aspects as well, because if we're taking the concept and debating about that single word faith, either in or outside religion, well, outside of religion, I think that that could be a useful tool for even innovative thinking.
Matt, I got nothing.
That's
It's
because
literally like
Kevin
talking to
speaks
a
in
word
sophistry
generator.
and concepts that make no sense at all. Cannot provide, I'm sorry, Kevin, I'm still talking. Can't provide a definition, cannot provide a clear response to anything. It is, Kevin, I'm not, I'd love to understand, but it's like you have half-formed thoughts that you're making up on the spot, and I can't even get you to define what faith is, how you can use it, or why it's good. Instead, you keep going in these circular patterns of, oh, well, I think outside of
Matt,
religion, it might
I
be.
had
I'm
already
still
told you
talking. I know
that
it's
I
difficult.
didn't.
I know it's difficult and I talk a lot, but I was literally seconds from being done and allowing you to talk if you hadn't tried to interrupt me. And now I got to spend another extra couple seconds telling you that I'm still talking. Just wait. It's better. I need you to just give me a definition of what you mean by faith and then explain why we should think that your definition is something laudable, something good, something worth pursuing.
Well, it's like I said, I didn't have a literal definition of faith for you. I was going along with how it's used with people,
Kevin,
either inside or outside religion.
Kevin, I don't think that I'm the person to have a conversation with you. I'm not convinced that you and I will ever have a productive conversation. Our brains just work too differently.
Thanks, Kev.
Yeah,
Appreciate the call.
That's pretty disappointing. Have a good one.
Have a wonderful day.
You're only half as disappointed as I am, I guarantee you. All right.
I can't define it, but I think it is productive. I don't really get that. Like, if you can't tell me what it is,
Yeah, I don't
then
have
how
a
do we know it's
definition. I'm just going with how everybody uses the term. Everybody doesn't use the term the same way, and I gave you a usage and talked about other usages. It's and made a distinction. There's a distinction between confidence and faith and trust and faith.
Yeah, I have faith that I will get to meet Jeff Goldblum after the show, or I hope I one day get to meet Jeff Goldblum, or two totally different conversations. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I'm going to meet somebody.
Faith is the expression of a confidence that may or may not be warranted. So, but anyway.
Vlad or Vladimir is dialing in after a prompt from Matt out of the chat. Vladimir, you're on with Matt Dillahunty and Seth Andrews.
Hi,
Are you there?
I'm just calling today because, I wanted to prove the existence of my God. And, honestly, I was quite disappointed when, the debate with Jay Dyer was, ran away from. So I guess I'm here now, right? So.
What debate? What debate? Wait a minute. What happened?
I debated Dyer years ago, and Dyer's fanboys think that Jay completely owned me, and nobody else thinks that, including other Christians who've called them out over it.
Did he own you, but also
I'm sorry, Vladimir. I know it's difficult for you. But I'm talking and I'm answering Seth's question, and you're not a part of this conversation just yet. And so Vladimir, I believe, was the individual in chat who wanted to ask why I wouldn't pick up for an Orthodox epistemology. And then I called out because I'd like for him to explain, what does he mean by Orthodox epistemology? And is it something that is good for us to adjust? Should we adopt an Orthodox epistemology? So Vladimir, are you ready to defend that?
Yes, sir. May I speak now?
Oh, no, actually, no, you can't. See, now I'm going to mute you because once again, you're someone that we can't take serious. Oh, you ran away. See, I asked you to call in and defend Orthodox epistemology, but instead, you, like all the Jay Dyer fanboys, decided to come in and whine your little ass off about an event from a debate from years ago. And then when you get called out for being absolutely awful and dishonest in not doing what you say you'll do, then you want to, well, now can I talk? No. It's silly.
Well, what's Orthodox epistemology? How do you have an Orthodox epistemology? I'm not sure I'm tracking.
I mean, aren't you guys embarrassed to be defending your religious belief in such a piss poor manner? I just released a video the other day saying I'm not relevant. And you just did the exact same thing, Vladimir. You instantly made it about me. And, oh, you ran from Jay Dyer. You're not serious. You're not a serious thinker, and you're not even honest about attempting to defend your beliefs. That's embarrassing. If I were a Christian, I would be completely embarrassed that Vladimir was here pulling stuff like this. I mean,
would you forgive my ignorance, Matt?
No, go ahead.
Who's Jay Dyer, and what was that debate about? Like, what happened?
I honestly don't remember much of the details of it. It's available online. The only time Jay Dyer is an apologist. The only time I hear or think about Jay Dyer is when his fanboys come in to pretend like I got my clock cleaned. And yet, okay, cool. Do you think that there aren't people who think I lose every debate?
Oh, I just looked at the YouTube channel. Is it JDYER?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, well,
I don't know how many years ago it was. Probably like
a video called Hollywoke. Secret symbolism in The Hobbit, the demonic Epstein files, the occult. The CIA is using anthropology in some way. Oh, he sounds like a real gem. It's
wild because these people show up in chat. There's basically two groups. We lost our other caller. I hope that Eric calls back. We
probably died of hopelessness after hearing Vlad dialing in. Couldn't take it.
So there's a couple of different categories of the troll-like callers and prompters who show up in chat. Some of them are Jay Dyer fans. Some of them Andrew Wilson fans, and some of them are Alex O'Connor, former fans who are vegan. Those are the three groups. Oh, and there's a fourth group of transphobes. Between those groups, and there's plenty of overlap, transphobes tend to overlap with most of those groups. I'm living rent-free in so many people's heads. And the things that, like them imagining what goes on in my sex life and then telling me about it, it's like, holy crap, I've literally never thought about you, and I've definitely never thought about what your sex life is like or what you get up to. And the fact that you've spent so much time thinking, I must be super hot. Like, I didn't think I was that hot, but I must be really hot for these people to be that obsessed with who I'm doing what with when.
It's amazing some of the arguments that I was thinking you were talking about in the context of, can a false belief or a supernatural belief enhance or improve someone's life, even if it's not true? You and I attended a debate that happened at Rogers State College in Oklahoma. There was the theist and the non-theist on the stage. And I remember the theist said something to the effect of, you know what? If I didn't have Jesus in my heart, I'd be a murderer.
Yep.
And I remember the response was, you know, in your case, I may be glad you're a Christian. Right?
Yeah. Like, if the only thing keeping you from being awful is going to church, I want you in church.
Yeah.
I'd like to find a better way. It's the same. It gets back to the same thing I said about AA and all these other things. If the only thing keeping you sober is a problematic program, I'd still rather have that. I just wish that we were building a world that was better. By the way, I find it funny that Vladimir called in and claiming he's from Russia while calling in from a Boston prefix.
You have borne false witness. Very, very bad. Coming back to another belief when it comes to death, I had this conversation. I see somebody dialing in, so I'm buying a second, but it was on my mind. Natalie and I were talking. Now, she says I'm a control freak, which is one of the reasons that I have a hard time delegating on my own work. I have a hard time, like, you know, I write and research and produce all my own stuff, and it takes freaking forever because I refuse to use AI to do it, you know?
Yes.
And so she's like, you've got to delegate more. And I'm like, I know how I want it done. Like, I know how I want it. So I told her, you know what? When my time, because we knew someone who had passed away, and it was a horrible tragedy, a young person. We went to the funeral, and the whole funeral was co-opted by the theist pastor as an excuse to preach a salvation sermon. And there was actually an altar call at the funeral. Would you like to see this young woman in heaven again? You know, say this prayer and raise your hand and profess your faith. It was really kind of offensive. And I have a ton of religious people in my family. And I'm not convinced if something was to happen to me and a memorial service took place, that at least one of them wouldn't grab a microphone and turn it into Jesus time. You know what I'm saying? It wouldn't literally build the soapbox on my casket. So I told Natalie, I said, you know what? If I knew it was coming, I think I would pre-record my own eulogy. Just throw me on the big screen. Hey, everybody. Well, I'm going to miss you. Well, not really, because I'm not conscious and don't exist anymore. I'm in that Mark Twain moment. I hadn't existed for billions of years before today, and I wasn't inconvenienced at all by it. But hopefully you'll miss me. And then I would literally give my own service. Takes the burden off of everybody else. I get to dictate terms. I'd probably have those Ouija board programs that says, let's keep in touch. Have the little planchet attached to them, hand them out. And then hopefully I could be a ghost, and then I could hover over and watch the religious people lose their minds. But I just had that thought, like,
I've wanted to do the same thing, but I know myself well enough to know that I'm going to procrastinate, and it's never actually going to get done.
You would, in theory, do your own eulogy?
Oh, hell yeah.
And if you don't get it done, somebody call me, because I know things. I could probably
yes.
cover it.
If I don't get it done, I approve Seth and Arden to put together whatever kind of bullshit they feel like saying about me.
Oh, we would talk some shit too. Harvey is dialing in from Canada. Oh, I'm tempted to seek asylum, Harvey, but says you're calling to talk about design. You're on with Matt and Seth. Let's talk. What do you think?
Yeah, hi guys. How are you tonight?
Wonderful.
Not too bad.
That's good. Yeah, I wanted to discuss the teleological or the design argument because when I look at I'm a theist, obviously, I'm a Christian, and when I look at the how precisely certain physical constants and the laws of the universe and other examples are so precisely fine tuned on a razor's edge. It just it makes for me it makes the position of atheism uh, just so extraordinarily unlikely. Like for example, and there's many examples. I'm sure you're familiar with all of them. But if the rate of expansion after the Big Bang was altered between 1 and a quintillion, which would be the equivalent of combining all the sand out
Harvey,
of all
didn't
the
we just
beaches
talk
in the
about this
world.
just the other day?
No, we didn't. That we discussed the Kalam cosmological argument.
I'm pretty sure you touched on this as well. So let me ask this. Isn't your entire
No,
argument here predicated on the notion that we were the goal?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Isn't your entire argument predicated on the assumption that we are the intended goal?
Not at all. My argument is predicated
Really?
on the fact that we have certain examples in nature, such as the cosmological constant, such as the rate of expansion after the Big Bang, the particular size and location of our planet in the solar system, etc., etc. And it comes down to what is the best explanation of those facts.
No,
One hypothesis is that
no, Harvey. There, first of all, you'd have to demonstrate that they could be any other way. And second of all, if they were some other way, we wouldn't be here, but perhaps something or someone else would be here talking about how it seems designed. How many universes do you have that you can explore and investigate? As far as I know, we only have the one.
Yeah, of course we can't.
Okay. So if we only have the one, how do you tell the difference between a universe that was intentionally designed and a universe that was not intentionally designed? What's the hallmark to tell the difference?
Well, first of all, where you're making the claim that it's possible that other life forms or other.
No, sir. No, sir. Harvey, listen to me very carefully. I did not make a claim. I'm asking you to defend your point. How did you determine that this isn't the only possible way the universe could be? Where is your hallmark for telling the difference between a universe that was designed and a universe that wasn't designed?
Because so far as we know, there is no mechanism that would prevent these characteristics of the universe from being different. We don't have any law in physics that would indicate that these constants and quantities would have to be this way. So
Okay.
if you were going to make that claim, you would.
I'm not making that claim, Harvey. Please listen to what I'm actually saying and stop assuming you know what I'm saying when you don't. I have no idea.
I'm listening to you.
I have no idea how the universe could have been different or not different. I'm not making a claim that it had to be this way. I was asking you how you determined that it didn't have to be this way. We only have the one universe, and you asserting or claiming that because we cannot demonstrate that it couldn't have been another way, all of a sudden that means it's possible, is an assertion that I will reject, but I don't have a problem with it. My problem is, here's a universe. What is the way to tell if that universe was intentionally designed rather than not intentionally designed, because there are millions. If you shuffle a deck of cards, there's millions of different possibilities. There are more possible potentially shuffled decks than there are stars in the universe. If I deal out a particular 13 cards to 4 players, like a bridge hand, the odds of any hand is astronomical. It doesn't matter whether you get 13 spades or 12 spades and a heart, or 4 spades, 4 clubs, 7 diamonds, and 3. What did I leave out? Whatever. All of those hands are equally likely. So what is the criteria you use to determine that the specifics of this universe are more probably the result of intended design than that they occurred by a natural mechanism that you don't know about?
Okay. Well, first of all, the example you provided has a fallacy, because not all hands are equally likely. It's
No,
not
you're
equally
wrong,
likely that
Harvey.
you would get,
Harvey,
you know,
Harvey. You are wrong. So first of all, there's no fallacy in my example. My example is correct. The odds of any configuration of a shuffled deck of cards is equal to any other configuration of a shuffled deck of cards, which means the odds of getting dealt 13 spades is exactly the same as the odds of getting 13 spades or 12 spades and a 5 of clubs. The odds of those two hands are exactly the same.
Okay. Yeah, I concede I was wrong on that. Thank you for the clarification.
Well, I'm wondering, though, why you would assert that my position is fallacious and then claim that my example is wrong when the math is 1 in 52 factorial and very easy to assess, instead of telling me what I want to know, which is, how do you tell the difference? How do you tell that the specific configuration of this universe is more probably the result of design than accidental? Because that what you're doing, and this is why I use this analogy, is you are looking down at a hand of cards that's been dealt to you, and you're saying, wow, this hand is so unusual that the odds of me getting this hand is different from the odds of other hands, but it's not.
So my answer is, you have to, in assessing, you have to look at the options you have available to explain these facts of nature, right? And as far as I can see it, there's. Sorry, go ahead.
I just said I agree. When we're trying to find a potential explanation for something, we have to make a list of the available candidate explanations.
Okay, perfect. So as far as I'm aware, I could be wrong on this. If I am, feel free to correct me. The options are that are on the table as potential candidates for explaining these facts. One option is design. Another option is chance, and another option is physical necessity. I haven't heard physicists propose any other alternative that would explain these facts. So when you look at
so I can answer you. I can answer you, Harvey.
Okay.
Why do you get to include intelligent design as a candidate explanation? What evidence do you have that there could possibly be an intelligent designer that is capable of, both with power and ability, producing this specific universe?
Well, we could infer that such a being exists.
No, we can't.
Or we can infer.
No, we can't. You have to demonstrate. No, you don't get to just assume that it's a candidate explanation. You have to list, when you're listing candidate explanations, you have to show that it should be considered a candidate explanation. And I have seen no evidence that it is even possible for a being to have existed with the physical and mental ability and power to design an entire universe. Where's the demonstration that that is a possible candidate explanation?
Well, I think that very gross. Like, it's a misrepresentation in a way. For example, dark matter. Scientists were proposing dark matter as a potential explanation before they
I'm
had
sorry. I'm
before the
sorry.
equations for dark
I'm
matter were
sorry.
worked out.
I'm sorry. I'm not proposing dark matter. Dark matter is irrelevant to this conversation. You don't even know whether what I do or don't accept about it. And you are just now avoiding defending your position
No, Matt,
by
I'm giving an
deflecting to
example.
something that is not relevant to the conversation. I asked you to defend your assertion that intelligent design is a possible candidate explanation for the state of the universe. And that doesn't require any discussion about what anybody else is proposing about any other subject.
Well, let me jump in. Harvey, I heard you talk
Matt,
about how if the Earth was any closer to or any further from the sun, right? The positioning of the planet,
Mhm.
making humankind and all of the other life forms as they are on this planet possible. Are you using that as part of a potential evidence chain? Like you are convinced that we are in this supposedly perfect position and only could have arrived there because we were placed by an intelligent designer. Would you say that that is a reason that you infer an intelligent designer?
What I would say was, and maybe I didn't communicate myself effectively, is we have certain constants and quantities and facts of nature that we know could have been otherwise, what values they need to accommodate for complex life. And so we need to look at what is the most reasonable explanation of those facts. And the explanations that have been, the potential candidates for explanations that have been proposed by both physicists and philosophers have been intelligent design, chance, or physical necessity.
No.
As far as I know,
Actually,
there
that's
isn't
not
another
correct,
candidate
Harvey.
on the
Hang
table.
on just a second. Let me jump in. To say physicists en masse or in large have said that in design is the best explanation is actually not correct.
I never said that. I never said that the physicist said that design is the best explanation. What I had said was that the potential candidates that both physicists and philosophers have given as potential candidates of explanation have been design, chance, and physical necessity. I didn't
Okay,
say
hang
that
on.
that physicists.
Hang on. If you are then
I'm
going
listening
to
to you.
say that life, complex life, the position of the Earth in our orbit around the sun, etc., from that we can infer a designer because it is so optimized in that way. Well, let's say we grant that. Then how do you explain examples, and there are so many, of poor design? Blind creatures with eyes, deaf creatures with ears, the appendix, which explodes in our bodies and kills us with bacteria, the esophagus next to the windpipe, so we choke to death. 5,000 people a year choke to death on their food because of a poor design, degenerating joints, the cartilage in our knees, death in childbirth, the pain and trauma of childbirth. Our sun gives us cancer, earthquakes, tornadoes, volcanoes, tsunamis, which kill 250,000 people in a day, wisdom teeth, genetic mutations. So, if you're going to say, wow, a complex life equals or potentially equals design, well, then you'd have to allow that if there is a designer, he did kind of a shit job, right?
Well, the first point is that that's kind of a separate, or it's not really a counter argument. That's a separate argument because many of the examples you listed, the pain of childbirth, for example, you could make the case that that's an example of shitty design, as you have vocalized it. But the pain of childbirth has no effect on the allowance for complex life. So you're talking
Hang on.
about, you're
Hold on.
describing things that are.
Hold on. Not only is it part of the conversation about design, because death and childbirth, not just of the child, but of the mother, has been a reality, right? There is a better way to do that. In fact, we can see in the animal kingdom and other creatures like the kangaroo a better way to procreate, where there's less trauma on the
Mhm.
body and better care, safer care of the offspring. So, relatively speaking, we are not as well designed. Our eyesight is not as good as other animals. Our taste buds and sense of smell is not as good as other animals. We are fragile in our bodies in ways that often kill us or harm us. So, I mean, if you're going to say designer, there's some really bad design. It's not a very good argument, right?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd like to say, and then trying to express this as respectfully as possible, but you're giving a mountain of examples and expecting me to provide one response that would deal with all of the matters at hand. But you could go, obviously I don't have all the answers to those specific things, but one of the examples you gave, just to point out that this really isn't a valid counter argument. Like, we don't have the same as strong of a sense of smell as other animals. Well, we don't need one. We don't need as strong of a sense of smell as a wolf does. We don't hunt in the same manner. You could also use the example: our teeth are not as sharp as a lion, but we don't use our teeth to kill prey. So,
Okay, well, let's do the easy one. Explain to me how an earthquake can cause the raising of a shelf in the ocean 30 feet, causing a massive tsunami that kills 230,000 people in a day. Explain to me how the designer of that world got it right.
in giving that example, you're moving away from poor design towards the problem of evil.
Okay, now we're getting into it. Now we're getting into the problem of needless suffering, or the problem of evil, which is a theistic argument, not a deistic one, not a prime mover, first cause, intelligent design argument. Are you
hold on, the
a
problem
believer in a
is an
specific religion, Harvey? Are you a Christian?
First thing I'm going to answer: yes, I am a Christian, and I want to respond to your previous point. The problem with evil was not a argument proposed by theists; it's an argument proposed by atheists, and it's an entirely separate matter from the argument.
It is not
of
an argument. The atheist. I'll let Matt have it. Forgive me, I jumped in. It's not an argument to reveal that theists are now playing the get out of bad design free card by saying everything that's beautiful, God or designer, everything bad is the problem of evil, the fall of man, the frailty of humankind, the plan went horrible or horribly, and it's essentially our fault that kids get leukemia and our son gives us cancer and our appendix explodes and kills us.
I've actually made no such case.
You are. If you are making a problem of evil claim, that's exactly what you just did. Matt, I'm going to shut up and stand back. Did you have anything else?
Sorry, are you speaking to me or Matt? Do I have anything else?
Go ahead. I mean, if you want to respond, you cannot invoke
I'll
the
let you
problem
respond
of
to
evil.
Seth, and then I can get back to my question about why God is a possible candidate explanation, or why design is. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say was I was not chalking those things up to well, that that's the problem of evil, and that's I wasn't playing. I was just making the point that the example of the earthquake and the tsunamis, etc. Those are typically arguments presented, or typically examples pointed to by atheists as part of the problem of evil, and are not.
Yeah, Harvey. The problem here is that you were essentially labeling. Harvey, the problem here is that Seth made a case, and you were basically saying, "Oh, that's the problem of evil." You were identifying the category of argument that Seth was making, or the category of objection Seth was making. And I mean, I don't know that it benefited. It clearly distracted ability to have a discussion just because you went and labeled something and then tried to say that this is an atheist thing, when in reality, the problem of evil is a category of arguments that are responses to theistic claims and how they are inconsistent with observations of reality. But since we're talking about design,
it's not inconsistent with.
I didn't say anything about it. You could have design and it could be shitty design. You could have design and it could lead to all kinds of potential objections. I'm talking about the design. So we have the status of the current universe, the observed facts, the data points that you'd like to point to. And I asked, because we agreed we need to make a list of candidate explanations. I wanted to know why intelligent design is a candidate explanation, and your answer seemed to confuse theoretical possibility or logical possibility with empirical or physical possibility. Something is theoretically possible or logically possible if it doesn't entail a logical contradiction. That is completely irrelevant to whether or not it is actually possible in reality, whether it is an empiric or physical probability. You are talking about an actual physical or empiric, because we're going to have a difficult time defining physics once we get outside of the universe. But you are making an appeal to the empiric possibility of a God, because I'm only going to accept candidate explanations that have been demonstrated to be empirically possible, physically possible. And then once you demonstrate that it's possible, you have to show how probable it is and how it's a more probable explanation than the other candidate explanation, which are the candidate explanations, which are at a minimum chance and necessity. So can you demonstrate that the designer is an empiric possibility?
Well, I would say we can infer that it's an empirical possibility because it serves as an adequate explanation.
So that's a no
for these facts.
So that's a no. That is a no, that you are not able. No, it's a no, because I asked you if you could demonstrate the empiric possibility, and you've asserted that we can infer it based entirely on the logical possibility. There's no demonstration that the being or designer that you're advocating is in fact possible in reality. You're assuming it because you want there to be an explanation other than chance or necessity.
Not that I necessarily want it to be the preferable explanation. When I look at the fact, it seems to me that design is a more probable explanation than chance or physical necessity.
Harvey, when I look at the facts, I don't agree with you. So now we can just both sit here and say, well, that's just like my opinion, bro. And we'd make Seth all happy for a movie I haven't seen, but I heard lots of good things about. Or you can actually stop just giving me your opinion that I don't care about and that should not inform anyone's assessment of possibility or probability. And you can then either acknowledge that you do not have a way to demonstrate the empiric possibility or probability of a designer, or you do. Which is it?
Well, to be completely frank and honest, at this point in time, as I don't have the ability to demonstrate that. Maybe I need to do a little bit more research on the topic.
It's wild. It's wild, Harvey. This is great. And call us back some other time, especially if you figure out a way to do this. But I literally asked you an easy question that could have been answered with a no. But instead of just saying the no, like I'd go back to your, I'm still talking. I'd go back to your Bible where it's recommended that let your no be no and your yes be yes. Instead, no carries so much weight. And I don't know if there's somewhere in the back of your head fear of saying no, or fear of acknowledging that you don't know something, or fear that the soundbite's going to be used against you. But doing a long, meandering, multi-sentence no in order to avoid saying no doesn't really play well. The answer is no. You do not currently have a way to demonstrate even the possibility of a designer, right?
As I stated, no, I don't. But I don't.
Wow.
I don't think there's anything
Here we are again.
Saying, I don't have an answer to this question.
You could have just acknowledged that I was correct, but you had to do the as I stated. No, you're always adding something to it. Here's some food for thought.
Well,
Go
I
do more
apologize
research.
that my
Go do more
communication style
research and add. Go do more research and add to that, rather than adding fluff to your simple answers that no, you do not currently have a way to demonstrate that the designer is even possible, let alone probable, let alone more probable than the explanations we already accept as probable, which are chance and necessity.
So
call
you're
us back
saying,
another
Harvey,
time.
you had not previously considered this stuff, but you will now consider it and assess it and take that journey? Is that what I'm hearing?
The only point I was trying to make was my answer to Matt's question was no, and I think I need to do a little bit more research on the topic to be able to potentially provide an answer. I don't see what's
Cool.
so illogical about that by saying I'm clearly outwitted on
No,
this matter. I clearly
I
don't
buy
have
that.
the same
Hey,
level of
Harvey, I
expertise
buy that.
as you
It's
do.
not really about wits. It's not a contest. If you say, you know what, I realize I wasn't prepared, I'm going to go dig a little deeper, as long as you say you're going to do that in good faith,
Yeah,
and you're not going to start with a
yeah,
presupposed
that's what
answer. I buy that. I do, and I appreciate
I
that,
bought
Harvey.
it too. I just didn't need a. Never mind. Brevity is the soul of wit.
Harvey, I appreciate your call, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. And I just have one quick question for Matt, before you hang up on me, if you don't mind. Matt, do you have any resources like books or anything you could recommend on from your perspective of a design argument that could potentially uh, put me in a better position to answer that question?
I do.
I don't know. Seth says that he does. I have a a video on my personal channel with books I think people should be reading. But Seth had a recommendation.
No. What's your channel? That might be a better resource.
Oh, youtube.com/sans deity, I guess.
Cool. Yeah. Dr. Abby Hafer has a book called The Not So Intelligent Designer. She passed away last year, but the book is going to be out there for posterity, which I really appreciate. She is a science professor, or was, and laid out some pretty compelling cases against intelligent design, and also lines out why many of the intelligent design arguments made by the Discovery Institute, etc., are actually poorly reasoned, fallacious, and often just outright lies. The Not So Intelligent Designer, Dr. Abby Hafer. Okay?
Also on YouTube, go
Okay.
look up Dr. Blitz and call in and talk to him about it. He's brilliant and a physicist and can address the physics aspects of it. And he's not remotely bad on the philosophical aspects as well. So much better, person to interact with. And he's more patient than I am, I would say.
Hey, thanks, Harvey. Appreciate the call.
Thank
We'll
you
see
guys.
you
Have a
later.
good night.
Who's Dr. Blitz? Where have I been? Help
Oh,
me out.
I've had him co-host shows with me. He's brilliant. He's a physicist, does live debates online on flat Earth, young Earth, lots of physics stuff,
Where have I
creationist
been?
arguments.
Is it like blitz, like a football blitz?
Yes.
Dr. Blitz Physics. All right. I have
Yeah.
homework.
You should look him up.
I pulled a
recommend.
lot of this stuff up while I'm out walking the dog or in the car, and I'll just listen to the audio version of it. So I'm always looking for something. It's not like, hey, can you listen? People will often ask content creators, can you listen to this 3-hour podcast? And we get a lot of that. But, from time to time, if I do find a point of interest, I'll try to throw it into my ears while I'm out and about doing my thing. So Dr. Blitz sounds like a promise.
It wouldn't surprise me if he was live right now. I don't know. But don't go looking. Stay here and watch this because we've got other callers.
Let's talk to Joseph dialing in from, is UT Utah?
Yeah, that's Utah.
Let's talk, Joseph. Glad I'm not the only one here with a biblical name. So yeah, welcome. What's up?
Not much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, what's up?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I wanted to ask a little bit about eyewitness testimony and where we fit that in, like where the sweet spot is for reliability. And I know that kind of depends on the claim and other details, but I find a lot of, at least no individual case of a UFO sighting to be compelling, but just the cumulative amount of anomalous sightings and some of the I feel like some of those have some pretty decent things going for them, like the Nimitz encounters. And I did talk to Dr. Aaron Adair and Erica on Skeptalk last week a little bit about it too. But I'm curious about where we place reliability exactly for eyewitness testimony.
I'm going to probably defer over to Matt, but help me out with the UFO. You mean shit we've seen but don't know what it is?
Well, not necessarily. I could be more specific. Maybe UAP is better because it's unidentified anomalous phenomenon, so it's identified as at least anomalous.
But I mean, doesn't that also fall under shit we've seen but can't explain?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. I'm just looking for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So the question, as I understand it, is, with so many people saying they've seen something, and there are commonalities in many of those eyewitness reports, does that mean that we should give perhaps some weight to the idea that there is some agency-driven thing in the skies? I'm trying to steel man the argument. Am I close, Joseph? I'm sorry, go ahead. Am I close on that?
Yeah, we could say something like NHI, like a non-human intelligence, for example, could be responsible for something anomalous, but wouldn't be our first pick necessarily, right?
So I'm getting ready to have a conversation with Joseph Schmid privately, because he and Alex O'Connor they did a video, something like arguments atheists should stop using or something, and at some point in the middle of it, they addressed claims, my claim that claims aren't evidence, and somebody cut that clip out and sent it to me, and I posted a video response to it not because they called me out. I don't care. I mean, there was a little snarkiness, but Joseph apologized for that, and it's probably just a sense of humor thing or whatever else. But it was unnecessarily dismissive. But the real issue was that they're wrong about the claim is not the evidence for the claim. The proposition is not the evidence for the proposition. But we do, and we should reasonably accept claims for which there is warrant. The warrant doesn't come from the statement. The statement contains no warrant. Instead, the claim is either supported by evidence or it is not. And when it is sufficiently supported by evidence, we tentatively accept that claim. It's warranted. I don't have to run the test myself, and I'm not just operating based on faith. And so claims are not evidence for themselves. Also, multiple claims, the plural of anecdote isn't data. And so the fact that you have 5,000 claims of something isn't evidence for the truth of the claim. That said, when you have a bunch of claims from people for whom the evidence suggests are trustworthy, at a minimum, we should be able to say, these people are experiencing something. Whether or not their description or understanding or what they think is the cause of this is a whole nother story. So there are, I don't know, millions of Christians who were in church this morning, who stood up, prayed, and felt what they interpret as the Holy Spirit. I have had that experience. I'm pretty sure Seth has had that experience. We've experienced something that we described as the Holy Spirit. In part, I described it that way because the people around me did, and it was consistent with what they were saying. And so, do I think that there is a Holy Spirit? Nope. Do I think anyone has ever had an encounter with this Holy Spirit? Nope. Do I believe that people have had experiences that they then credit to the Holy Spirit? Absolutely. I'm one of them.
Right.
Similarly, there are people who see things, and some people will determine that it's an alien from Alpha Centauri. Some will be it's an unidentified aerial phenomenon. And so the question isn't so much how much stock do we put in the claims? It's how far do we extend from the claims? I'm fine with believing that people are seeing things, as Seth was pointing out, shit we've seen that we don't know. My only objection is to reaching a conclusion about what the likely explanations are. And once again, we're back to let's list candidate explanations. I don't believe that visitors from another planet is a likely candidate explanation. It's logically possible. I don't see anything that would physically rule out the possibility of them existing, but I do see concerns about the physical possibility of them actually traveling to this relatively nondescript planet in this little portion of the universe. And so you've got things like the Drake equation to talk about how likely they are, and then there's the whole issue with space travel and what the potential limits are. But at the end of the day, people have experiences. Seems the correct answer is I don't know.
Matt, do we figure in a kind of confirmation bias given the fact that we're looking at, we are an Area 51 primed culture.
Yeah.
So we pattern seekers who have already been primed culturally to think aliens, if we see a motion in the sky, we see a light, an orb, a shape, we're going to run home to mama, so to speak, in our brains. Is that part of the conversation as well?
I would think
that
so.
would
And
also
also
say that it's kind of a U.S. phenomenon, right? When
I don't know.
also,
Don't other nations
really
see
not.
aliens? I mean, I don't know.
If you go back to the 50s and the 40s and the 30s, when they were talking about aliens, you had robots and insects and all kinds of things. And then when you get into the post Close Encounters of the Third Kind era, the prevalence for the descriptions being about the almond-eyed, big-headed little grays becomes prominent. Now, was it just that the Greys weren't visiting us prior to that, and when they showed up, all the narrative changed to it? Or is it the popular zeitgeist of here's what an alien looks like became here's what an alien looks like? Arden and I are going through Stargate SG-1. It's my, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth watch, whatever, but it's her first. And, the alien descriptions look like the Asgards. There's a reason they included the Asgards looking that way, because that's become what alien is. Does that mean that it's more likely that if there are non-terrestrial visitors that they in fact look like the Asgard from SG-1? I don't know. So it's not the eyewitness testimony that I'm trusting. When I hear eyewitness testimony, that is a claim of someone saying, I experienced this, it's similar to a lot of other experiences. And then there's what is the support for that claim? Why should I accept this claim? I find the person, reasonably honest, or I don't have any reason to consider them dishonest. What they're saying is consistent with a bunch of other claims. And so this could be a common experience. It's the secondary claim of, I experienced this, and here's what I think the explanation is. That's the one that needs the supporting evidence before we can make conclusions about it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's actually a really important distinction that puts this conversation on a better footing.
Well, hopefully it works out when Joseph and I talk, because I'm optimistic that we're kind of talking past each other a little bit. But the biggest problem was not just that they were talking about the claims as evidence, but Joseph doubled down on essentially saying that science is all about claims and trusting claims. And that's simply false. Science is not claims stacked on claims. It is, we reasonably trust as a matter of practicality, as a matter of pragmatic necessity. I don't have the time to repeat this particular test. I will trust the people who performed it and the people who repeated it and the peer review process that's going on, that this is generally reliable. My position is going to be tentative, and it's going to depend on, hey, is this coming from a source that we consider reliable as well? The fact that we pragmatically and as a matter of necessity rely on testimony does not make the testimony evidence. This is confusing how we do reason with how we ought to reason. And ideally, if time and resources weren't a problem, we would be repeating every single experiment, verifying, but that's completely unnecessary because I can be mostly right as long as I'm good about properly assigning confidence. As here we are referencing Hume again, the wise man proportions his confidence to the evidence. And so when I get a claim, a study, for example, in a journal, I'm able to review their test methodology myself if I want to. I'm able to review their conclusions if I want to. I'm able to review the data they're presenting. There could be a typo in the data. They could have made it all up like the vaccines cause autism people did. And so, yes, we rely on testimony. That does not make the testimony evidence. That's about how we have to go through our daily life.
That makes sense. Okay, so I guess the witness, I mean, I guess really the witness accounts themselves aren't even really claims. They're just descriptions of something, and then the claims would be the candidate explanations that we propose for that, right?
Kind of. There are people who claim to have been abducted by and have interactions with grays or whatever else. Right. That's kind of where, it's not like Close Encounters made something up and everybody used it. These were the reports that were popular enough for them to become spread, massively. And so if somebody says, last night, a little gray alien comes in my bedroom and abducts me and takes me to a spacecraft, they're describing their perception of experience. And while I'm happy to think they experienced something, I don't think they experienced what they're actually describing because I don't have sufficient evidence to reach the conclusion that that explanation is likely.
Right. So I guess there's for example, there are some scenarios that I feel that the candidate explanations become constricted, and the amount of prosaic explanations that can fit become, it seems like you have to go so far out on a limb to posit prosaic explanations for some of these, like the Nimitz encounter, for example. I think is a decent example of something. If we take all the evidence of both the radar tracks and the multitude of pilot witnesses and stuff like that, if we take all those into account, it becomes, there are just lots of explanations that become kind of ridiculous to imagine being responsible for a scenario like that, like a balloon or a bird, at least to me.
Well, I mean,
and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's aliens then, but at least in light of something, say, like the Drake equation, where we are sort of expecting to see extraterrestrial life, and I talked to Dr. Aaron Adair about it, and he has a book about it, and he's a little more conservative with his numbers, but he still concedes that at least within the universe there should be so many civilizations out there that have been out there for so long by now that we should expect to see something, and I think we would be found much sooner than we would find them, because we've only had radio technology for around 100 years anyway.
Yeah, but there's also the possibility that we're among the first, or that, and I know the Drake equation includes all this as well, as whether or not, those civilizations are likely to destroy themselves, whether or not they ever get to a point where there would be radio transmissions. But I mean, our radio transmissions haven't traveled. I don't think any of ours have traveled far enough to likely draw the attention of
we have
any civilization that we wouldn't already be aware of.
Yeah, we have biosignatures and have had them for millions of years. So that's one of those things where we would immediately become a very attractive place to go to just for the fact that we have life on the planet at all.
Would we though? Because we're currently we found that the building blocks of life are, out there, and we've found a few planets that we think we've identified that at the time that we're seeing them, which, given distances, things might have changed, but they were potentially habitable. They were Earth-like, things like this. We've found a couple of them. And yet we have no ability at all to travel to any of them or to even investigate them beyond remotely. And if other civilizations are in a similar spot, or if the physical laws about traveling long distances like that prevent that sort of investigation, then it wouldn't matter how many of them knew we were out there. But also, you have to, space is big, and you would have to be highlighting this. I mean, we've explored just a tiny little fraction of what we're able to see. And we haven't, I wouldn't even say we've dipped a toenail into this yet. So.
Well, and that was a point that I specifically talked to Dr. Aaron Adair about with gravitational propulsion and how that could cut down distances literally. But
Hey,
I will admit he decreased my confidence in the idea of that.
We could run scenarios all night, Joseph, on this, but it is an interesting subject. If you do encounter a UAP, document and protect your orifices. And thanks for calling the show.
That's actually one question I...
Very quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Very quickly.
Yeah. If I imagine myself seeing something just ridiculous, like a straight up flying saucer landing in front of me, two little gray dudes coming out and walking back in, I guess in your guys' position, what would be your first explanations for that, especially if you saw it at the same time and confirmed with each other that you saw it?
Oh, if we were both standing there and we both saw it, I'd be recording it on my cell phone. I'd be describing what I'm seeing. I'd be getting Seth to say that he's seeing it as well. And then we would go get ourselves checked out to make sure that there wasn't sort of some sort of mental aberration or whatever else, and then submit it for other people to investigate. And then we would have to get very comfortable with probably never finding out what it was.
All the while protecting our orifices. Joseph, thanks for calling. Be safe out there, okay?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Learn something new. As a purist about the 1994 film Stargate, I resisted SG-1. I was terrified they were going to ruin it. You're telling me it's a good series?
It's one of the best. It's not the best, but it's among the best. There's some bullshit you have to wrap your head around. For example, Arden, how much are you enjoying it, and how much do you think you would enjoy any Star Trek?
I like it a lot. I mean, there's some parts that are definitely cheesy. I think once you get to a certain extent of having long series, they kind of, you're really, there comes a point where you start to have to milk a series, but the first 6 or 7 seasons so far have been really pretty strong. And I did watch the movie first, and I liked the movie, which was kind of what was our test to see if I would like the series.
I was just worried it was MacGyver in space. I just had a hard time with my brain connecting those dots.
It's maybe a little
bit. You may or may not like it, but I'm enjoying watching it again. I think Babylon 5 has my favorite treatment of religion in sci-fi series. Stargate SG-1 has something I like similarly, but not quite as much. But you have to get past the everybody everywhere on every planet speaks English, except when it doesn't make sense for them to.
Well, I mean, I know Star Trek, whether it's classic or TNG, et cetera, had a very humanistic philosophy. I mean, there's not a lot of mythology. There's certainly a lot of sci-fi fantasy, but I find that interesting. Okay, we got to call it a show.
Yep.
Matt, it's always good to see you, my friend. Thanks to everybody who dialed in, who watched, and who listened. We are segueing out of this broadcast, but the fun is just starting. We've got Calling It Now. Is it Forrest and Jimmy coming up next? So
That's my
hang
understanding.
on, stay dialed in, be safe. We'll see you next time.
Go to linemerch.com and patreon.com/calltheline. And then there's another Sunday show even after that. It's never ending here on the line, except this one's going to end right now.